OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
All right, it's 7:30 on Thursday, 25th of March. You're welcome along to OTB AM. It's Ger Eoin and Shane with you all the way through until 10 this morning. We're picking over the coals of Serbia's 3-2 win against Ireland, which we had to be live across all the OTB platforms last night. Here's the story of the evening.
Brown to Doherty. Doherty again goes early, and again it's straight onto a Serbian player, but Ireland win the second ball this time with Brown. Now Enda Stevens comes forward for the first time into the area to Callum Robinson. Robinson brings it towards the end line, sends it across. There's Alan Brown with the header, and Ireland get their goal. Alan Brown heads into the back of the net. It's Serbia 0, Republic of Ireland 1. Look at the joy in Stephen Kenny's face. Huge goal and a huge moment in his tenure as Ireland manager. Robinson with the cross, and Alan Brown, who suffered such pain in Slovakia, while he redeems himself in Belgrade. It's Serbia 0, Republic of Ireland 1. To Stefan Mitrovic of Strasbourg, and he looks a little bit uncertain when there was any pressure applied at all. Now Tadic with an important header forward. Chance for Vlahovic and a goal for Serbia. And really it's come out of nothing. One ball forward, flicked on by Dusan Tadic. And Dusan Vlahovic got in behind Dara O'Shea. And it was a clinical first-time finish from the informed Serbian striker. And Serbia have their equaliser. It's Serbia 1, Republic of Ireland 1, 39 minutes gone. A chance for Serbia, and they've gone in front with a sensational chipped effort. Alexandra Mitrovic, the substitute from 25 yards out, spotted Mark Travers off his line, and an exquisite finish after a mix-up at the back involving Enda Stevens and Alex Mitrovic. That was pure class, and it's a sucker punch for Ireland. Can Ireland find a way to save their keeper? Doherty again with a little tug of the jersey, it looked like, in Tadic. This time the referee lets him away with it. The ball is played short there from Cullen in behind Shane Long. Pavlovic intercepts, little flick on then to Dusan Tadic, 25 yards out, sends it in towards Mitrovic, who's in again and scores again past Mark Travers. Alex Mitrovic has come off the bench, and he's going to be the match winner for Serbia from 1-0 down. Serbia now lead the Republic of Ireland by 3-1. Tadic the creator, Mitrovic with a clinical finish past once again a badly positioned and flailing Mark Travers. Oh, a chance here, a chance for Ireland, and they're going to get a second goal.
Yes.
It's in, a mix-up at the back by Serbia, and the Republic of Ireland have capitalised, and it's James Collins off the bench who eventually taps it in from a yard out, and maybe we will get that grandstand finale. Mitrovic just tried to head it back to his goalkeeper. It's Stefan Mitrovic, the centre-back, tried to head it back to the goalkeeper, left it short. Ireland player pounced in, knocked it back to James Collins, and he managed to bundle the ball in, and Ireland are back in this. Robbie Brady was the one who flicked it forward. Shane Long was the player who pounced it brilliantly to pull it back for Collins. His first shot was blocked, but it spun into the back of the net, and he toe poked it in from a yard out. Serbia 3, Republic of Ireland 2. Is there still a chance?
No, it turns out there wasn't still a chance. There was no grandstand finish. That's exactly how it finished last night. We'd love to hear from you this morning. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Of course, you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream, as many of you already are. What did you make of the performance last night? Were you happy with the selection, with the team shape, with the individuals that we went with? How do you feel about the future? Where do you stand on Stephen Kenny now? These are the big questions that we get a little bit more evidence to parse through, Owen, because before this game, the Slovakia game aside, there had been not much evidence of what we would look like in a competitive fixture. And he went 3 at the back last night, to the surprise of everybody except those people watching this show yesterday.
Yeah, and I guess you really want to judge a team on their most important games, and one of those 2 important games was against Serbia last night, the other one being Slovakia, obviously, last year, and he went 3 at the back for this. Yeah, like there could be some suggestion that Stephen Kenny second-guessed himself with that team selection last night. I genuinely think that was what he thought was the best way of winning that game, and kind of connected to that, the best way of getting his best players on the pitch, especially with some of the injuries that they had. There's no getting away from the fact that Ireland played well last night. There will constantly be questions about whether or not they can stop a threat like Dusan Tadic in a way that will also allow them to score goals at the other end. Because the benefit of previous systems was that Dusan Tadic probably doesn't notch up 3 assists in a game. at the same time, yesterday you're looking at an Ireland team that you're more inclined to pay to watch than any other Ireland team over the past few managements, to be quite honest with you. This was an exciting performance. This was a team full of youngsters, a midfield in particular that was very youthful. That will come with naivety. There will be moments of hardship for this midfield. But I don't think you can look at that game last night and think to yourself, the future isn't bright for Ireland, or at least the future isn't going to be better for Ireland over the next few months.
Well, I think you can. I think that there's definitely a way of being glass half empty about that. And not to pour scorn on it, but just to tease that out a little bit. Like we were taken apart when the game was in the melting pot a little bit by the opposition last night. Now, here's the thing. They're 10 places ahead of us in the world rankings. They have, as you outlined yesterday, a backbone of a team who have quality in the higher leagues around Europe and better young players than we do. But that might be as good as it gets from an Ireland perspective. Like how much are we going to get into that team that wasn't there last night? A goalkeeper, Conor Hourihan, how many other players? Okay, John Egan, hopefully when he comes back and is fit again. How many other players are actually going to take us to that next level? So how much better can we get, Owen? That's the question that I suppose we don't know, and we won't know until, we play Luxembourg and play well and play Serbia again in Dublin and see how that goes.
Well, I'd like to think that the likes of Josh Cullen, Jason Malumbi, Jason Knight, 24, 21, 20. I know Knight didn't play last night, but those players are of a certain age where you're almost banking on them getting better. Even Alan Brown at the age of 25, you can almost be confident that he will get better over the next little while. In attack, they sort of have to get better. Like I do think that there has been a rush to condemn this generation to a generation that will not have a goal scorer, as if Adam Ida and Troy Parrott won't have a part to play over the next few years. Of course they're going to have a part to play. They're young kids. They are going to develop into at least average goal scorers. Can we back an Irish player over the next, say, until the next World Cup qualifying campaign, over the next 5 years, to get to a level where they are maybe a mid-table Premier League striker playing week in, week out, to the level that, say, Shane Long was when he was at his peak? I think you can have confidence that that might actually happen. We may not have a Robbie Keane, but we may get that over the next couple of years. The fact of the matter for me last night is that if Darren Randolph is playing, or if Alexander Mitrovic doesn't come up with a mad piece of skill for that second goal, I don't think Ireland concede that. And I don't think if Ireland concede that goal, there is a huge chance of them actually getting broken down eventually. Now, the counterpoint to that is that Tadic wasn't on the pitch when Ireland get back to 3-2, and maybe if he was on the pitch, they actually score a fourth. Who knows? We don't know that situation. But I just feel that there was this one critical moment, and of course you can factor the penalty in there as well on that level, that has affected how everybody will view this game last night. If that's a draw, and if Ireland come away from Belgrade with a point, it is a phenomenal result, and it is a brilliant moment for a young team, and a team with like, when did we have an average age of 25 points something? When was the last time that happened? I don't know, and I think there are far more positives than negatives coming away from last night.
Brian Dillon's been in touch to say the first Ireland match that I've enjoyed in a long time. We played the ball on the ground as much as they could. Okay, Travers was in no man's land, but the ball fell to a top-class striker and was an amazing finish. In fairness, Mitrovic, like all those years that we've been watching Mitrovic be very hot and cold. Unfortunately, last night was one of those nights where he was hot. It could easily have been one of those nights where he was cold, and that ball shanks off his right foot and hits the corner flag, and we're like, ha, 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 ha. That's why you were on the bench, Mitrovic. But the laugh's on the other side of our face this morning, Owen. Let's get some reaction here from Stephen Kenny in the aftermath about what went wrong for Ireland.
Obviously, we've had a blatant penalty rejected. Absolutely, we've watched it back, and Ireland's touched the ball away, and the players fouled him. Mitrovic, the centre back, has fouled him. That's a penalty to go 2-1 up, and we're not losing the game at 2-1 up in the second half. That's for sure. We're not saying we definitely would have won it, but I don't see us losing it. So that's a very pivotal moment in the game. The concession, the second goal is a disappointing goal. We know that. And then the third goal, we're wondering how we're 3-1 down, but we all of the subs come on. I felt all the substitutes made an impact. Obviously, James Collins got the goal back, and it's a late rally for the equaliser, which we don't quite get. But it's I think we're just disappointed to lose the game, really, and it hurts. I think Serbia a very good team. Have a lot of very good attacking players, but we feel that we're disappointed to lose.
Were you able to talk to the referee afterwards about that decision?
Not really, not really.
Yeah, he wasn't going to change his mind at that stage anyway. So I enjoyed last night's game. I thought Ireland tried very hard, never gave up, says Shane. We're just very, very limited. Kevin on WhatsApp says, I'm gutted for Ireland and Kenny last night as the team largely performed very well. The shape was good. Cullen, Brown and Robinson were excellent. Travers looked shaky throughout and it was a woeful positional error. Bazunu might be better for Saturday. Clark should have won the header for the first and third goal. Connolly denied a stonewall pen. How is VAR in club football and not international? We could beat Serbia in Dublin and must win this Saturday. Tadic was the difference. In Kenny we trust. Also, Knight should play Saturday and switch to 4-3-3 as facing an inferior team. Let's talk a little bit about the formation, and we'll get into that. So we can get into that with Phil in just a moment as well. But 0879 180 180 is the number. We've got Vinny Perth coming your way a little bit later on too, and Gary Breen. So we'll talk to them about any of the questions that you might have for them if you want to get them into us. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Phil Egan, good morning to you.
Hey, Ger, how are you doing?
Did the formation work? Did three at the back work for Ireland?
Well, I mean, the formation is obviously set up to try and get your best players into the team. So Matt Doherty plays in his favourite position, the position that got him his move from Wolves to Tottenham. Obviously doesn't play there with Spurs at the moment. Did it work? I think the worry in previous games against better opposition under Stephen Kenny is we've been left exposed. Teams have cut through us too easy. That didn't happen too much last night. So you could say the signs are there that it did work. In terms of, I mentioned Matt Doherty, I know it's something that Stewie Byrne said after the game in his considered piece with Nathan, that he didn't think Matt Doherty had a good game, and I would tend to agree on that. I thought Seamus Coleman slotted in perfectly, exactly how I thought he would. We've talked about this formation before, and I always likened Seamus Coleman to the way Azpilicueta would play in the Chelsea back three, where you're a full back that has no problem being pulled out into wide areas. You're used to sweeping up behind centre halves. Wasn't as easy for Kieran Clark. He found himself exposed at times when he was brought out into wide areas. That's not where centre halves want to be, because usually that's where their full backs do the cleaning up for them. So Kieran Clark definitely didn't work as well as Seamus Coleman. I thought Darragh O'Shea had a good game. I think there was a moment in the 8th minute where O'Shea took the ball out in defence and pinged a pass into midfield. And if anyone was wondering why Darragh O'Shea got the nod over Shane Duffy, that moment was it for me, where he played a ball. It was a brave ball where, it was a pass that had to be through the eye of a needle, and he wasn't afraid to do it.
Yeah, I think this is interesting. The Clark selection, we thought that he would actually be very reliable given how much football he's played and the fact that he's back to something approximating his own best form. But actually there were a couple of key moments in the game where he looked uncomfortable. As you said, there was one stage where he was dragged out to the left wing back position and was kind of just a little bit slow to close down the space. You thought, okay, they sense something there. And then he just wasn't really strong around the box. He wasn't a commanding centre back presence in key moments when he needed to be. No,
I mean, you look at the first goal and people will say that O'Shea kind of gets caught a little bit by Vlahovic, but it's actually Kieran Clark comes out to try and win the header. He doesn't get there, so he was obviously out of position. O'Shea had a decision to make. Does he step up and try and play offside, or does he go with the runner? He went with the runner, but he just couldn't get there quick enough. And then obviously Mitrovic's second goal, the header, that's a ball put into the box. And this was something that Vinny Perth had actually flagged in the build-up to the game when he was on with Gary Breen during the week, that if Mitrovic plays, that's where you would want Shane Duffy. Now, obviously Mitrovic didn't start, and Stephen Kenny, there wasn't many calls that he made last night where I would have disagreed with him. Actually, remember yesterday morning we were talking about it, and you mentioned, is there a possibility he could go with a back three? And I actually listed off a team that I'd love to see, but I didn't think he'd actually play the back three. So I was very surprised when I saw it. The only difference, I had Jason Knight on my team. Now, I don't think he could fault the midfield three. I thought obviously Alan Brown got his goal, but even in the lead up to the goal, he was very good. Josh Cullen had a very good first half. I thought it was a lot harder for him in the second half. I thought Malumbi played his way into the game and obviously went off. Now, they put a lot of energy into that game. They pressed a lot, and we seemed to run out of energy. And there was people criticising Aaron Connolly for having to get somebody to relieve him of cramp, but Stephen Kenny did say in the build up to this game that the likes of McLean and Connolly were undercooked because they hadn't played football. So I wouldn't necessarily be critical of Aaron Connolly. Some people saying a professional footballer shouldn't be cramping up in the 60-minute mark, but he literally has not played football in weeks.
I think go on.
Is there a case, Phil, in that formation last night, accepting that was a decent move, that maybe Aaron Connolly wasn't the type of player that he wanted there, especially when Callum Robinson is offering a bit of a foil? Like, could someone like James Collins have been a better option from the start? I just felt that moment for Serbia was going to come before half-time. When Ireland were under a lot of pressure, that outball perhaps, which maybe Aaron Connolly should be better at providing, wasn't there. Robinson was doing a lot of that running, whereas someone like James Collins might have made the ball stick a little bit better, relieved the pressure a little bit more, and maybe that opportunity doesn't present itself before halftime. Yeah,
and I think actually when Collins came on, obviously he got his goal, but he was actually quite neat and tidy, just with little flicks and little touches. I think with Connolly, I can see the idea in playing him and what you want from him, and there was times where the ball was on and he didn't make the run. That's something he has to learn. He's still a rookie at this level. I know he's playing Premier League football with Brighton, but he hasn't played that much. Obviously, he's still learning on the job, and there was times where you could see the midfielders were frustrated because they got the ball and they were waiting for Connolly to make that run down the side, and that's where obviously I thought Serbia actually looked vulnerable at times. Their back three, they weren't the most mobile at times, but Connolly didn't make that move. And unfortunately, it is a learning curve. It's quite a steep one, and its results matter. Like, there's so much pressure now on that game on Saturday because we're expected to beat Luxembourg. It's all well and good saying there was positive signs last night in the way we set up a different formation. You know, we tried to pass the ball. We didn't just lump it all the time. But there is serious pressure now on that game because it's 9 games without a win, and people are starting to wonder, are we going to see that win? And Luxembourg provides a really good chance to get the first 3 points.
Yeah, and look, Luxembourg aren't the same Luxembourg from the 1980s where they're going to roll up and be beaten 4-0 by half-time. So let's wait and see what happens, and we'll talk about that game. We've obviously got it live on Off the Ball on Saturday evening as well. Talk to me about the midfield, Phil. How did that work? Why did it work? How did that trio gel?
Well, I thought Josh Cullen obviously made himself available for the ball all the time, and that's what you want from a midfielder, that there's always that option there. And most of the time in the first half he was looking to play the ball forward, because so often you see it from players that they make themselves available but they'll just play the ball back to a full back, and it's just basically giving the responsibility back to the defender to say, actually, you get rid of it because I'm not going to turn on it. So he played in the turn. I thought Malumbi took a while to get into the game as well. Alan Brown is just very dynamic in the way he seems to time his runs very well, and that's what he did for the goal. He got on the ball, timed his run. He actually said, obviously knowing Callum Robinson from when they played together at Preston, that when Robinson got the ball inside the box, he said, yeah, Callum Robinson is going to be able to just stand this one up to the back post. And the beauty of the goal going in, actually, because when Ireland scored, it's been so long since we scored, I didn't have to worry about VAR potentially ruling out the goal, because obviously there was no VAR, which obviously had its pitfalls, as you heard there from Stephen Kenny. Yeah, I think we just ran out of energy, but there was signs in that midfield three that there's potential in it. And what you want from a midfield three is you want players available on the ball and making themselves available, finding that space. So there's still plenty to work on, because I found as the game went on, there was less options for our players, and they have to ask themselves, why was that? Were players running out of energy? Had Serbia sussed us out? Because the pressure was starting to crank up a bit. Serbia were getting more of a foothold in the game, where players maybe retreating a little bit. So these are all things that Stephen Kenny will have to go through before Saturday's game against Luxembourg. But look, the potential is there to keep growing, but we need that win.
What else is happening in the world, Phil?
Well, just to let you know, obviously Luxembourg, we mentioned, are the opponents on Saturday night. They played Qatar. Obviously Qatar, the World Cup hosts, and they're going to be playing all the teams in our group. So that game was played in Hungary last night, and Qatar won 1-0. Portugal beat Azerbaijan 1-0, and you look at the quality of Portugal, they're able to leave Bruno Fernandes, Diogo Jota and João Felix on the bench, and they have a phenomenal squad. Fernandes did come on, somehow his effort in the second half was kept out, but Portugal are the team to beat. Obviously it'll be interesting to see how Serbia get on against them this weekend. Wales were in action as well last night, like ourselves. They went 1-0 up away to Belgium. That would have been a bigger shock if they had pulled off that win, but Belgium came back to win 3-1 in Group E. More action tonight. Northern Ireland start their Group C campaign against Italy. That game in Parma. Scotland are at home to Austria in Group F, and Wembley is the venue for England's Group I opener against San Marino. Rory McIlroy and Shane Lowry both beaten on day one of the WGC Match Play Championship in Texas. McIlroy had an absolute shocker against Ian Poulter. Lowry was beaten by Ryan Palmer. McIlroy's back in action this evening just before 7 o'clock when he goes up against American Lanto Griffin. Lowry tees off against Spain's John Ram at 8 o'clock. And a throwback to the 90s, lads. Stephen Hendry against Jimmy White at the World Snooker Championship. Not quite at the Crucible, it's the qualifiers. They'll play each other. You need to win 4 rounds to reach the Crucible, but they had those memorable 4 finals between 1990 and 1994. As a Jimmy White fan, it broke my heart as Hendry beat him every time.
Jimmy had a good life, though. He was having the crack, especially in the middle of some of those finals, it turns out. Phil, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Thanks, lads.
More from Phil across the day on OTBSports.com. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock this morning. Dr. Cathy Kelly and Dr. Noel McCaffrey are going to join us at 20 past 8. It's a big takeover day for us. I'll tell you about that in just a little while as we talk about a new training program for cancer patients. Gary Breen is standing by. We're going to talk to him immediately about what's happening over the last night and at the weekend. John Duggan going to join us around about 8:40 for another update. Vinny Perth going to give us his thoughts at 10 to 9, and then we'll bring you your TV picks with Sue at 10 past 9. We're going to hear from Niamh Briggs about the Irish rugby team beating England at the weekend. Now, Gary Breen is with us. Gary, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Where do you stand? Where are we at the moment? What are you taking from last night's performance?
I really enjoyed it. I felt it was a bold selection in terms of the fact that Duffy, Hendricks, Brady don't play. I really enjoyed the shape of the team. I was watching it, Ger, and I was thinking, I was actually talking back at the tape thinking, that's brilliant, great shape. Even to the extent where Serbia, who considered technically gifted players, were passing back to their goalkeeper, who was then having to hit it long. Even in situations on throw-ins, they were being forced just to throw that kind of, that long, hopeful throw down the line. They weren't kind of coming back out and playing because the setup was so good. And it looked well coached. It looked very disciplined in how we were doing it. There were different stages of it that I really liked. That initially, the 2 strikers would split, and then Alan Brown would just sit behind them. So that 3. So they were literally encouraging the Serbians. They were literally saying, "Go on, I dare to play those passes centrally." And they didn't have the confidence to do it. They kept coming back out, going back to their goalkeeper, as I said. And that was in and around their own area where, more often than not, over the years, we've seen us being so passive and let teams have a ball, let them get ahead of steam, get a nice feel for the game. But we didn't do that. Then when we had to go a bit further back, that system then changed a little bit where we had our back 5 in shape and we had a kind of a 4 box in midfield. And then the centre forward would hunt around and make it difficult. And they found it so hard to play through. So that was really encouraging. But, yeah, to concede that goal just before half-time was the killer blow. It really was, because it seemed to knock the stuffing out of us. But more than anything, it really seemed to take the pressure off of Serbia, who I had identified that. I know lots of people had said that it was a bonus that there wasn't a home crowd. I always felt going into that game that it was a negative for us, because had they played that way with their crowd on the back of being knocked out of the playoffs to Scotland, I think that crowd would have churned. I think they would have struggled, those players, and I think we'd have been energised by it. So I was disappointed with it in terms of that. And obviously the second half plays out the way it does. And There are positives, of course they are, but I am acutely aware of the fact that it's another loss.
Well, let's deal with the negatives and finish up with the positives, so that the texts coming through are divided. There's two camps. There's one saying I got to watch a team that I enjoyed playing last night, and the other one is very cold. The game is to play well now and qualify. Once again, we sucked into the positives for the future. That's from Patrick on YouTube this morning. I can understand that viewpoint. I can, because the game is to qualify for tournaments, and here we are, a game into the first qualifying campaign, first of this new campaign, and we've still got Portugal to play twice. So it's very unlikely we're going to qualify from this group now. But I mean, it was kind of unlikely we were going to qualify from the group in the first place. So what do we want? What are we trying to achieve with Stephen Kenny?
Well, exactly, because I mean, so many people saying let's write this competition off and bring these younger players. There's no guarantee. Listen, we talked about this young generation initially a year ago, and none of them have come to fruition in the way we thought they would have done in terms of consistency. It's been Knight and O'Shea really, as opposed to Ida, Connolly, Malumbi, and who played very well last night. Bearing in mind he's not getting his league football, and I made a big point of that I don't think the Ireland team is picked on your league form as such, your club form, whether or not you're playing well. But for young players like that in your formative years, he has to start playing club football, because we saw his ability and he's never let us down for Ireland. He looks a real attribute, Malumbi, but he has to start playing club football. And to kind of write off a tournament, which means everything to Ireland anyway, to get to major finals, of course it does, to suggest that, yeah, but in 4 years' time, these guys will be much better. Football doesn't work like that. We don't have the strength in depth to be able to cope with that in terms of bringing through 20 young players who can suddenly make a team. I don't agree with that, and I think, and I also don't understand why we can't play nice football and win games. I don't understand that. There seems to be, an offset of, well, if we want to play nice football, we're not really going to win. Well, why? Why aren't we going to win? So I think there's lots of learning curves there. Young players will learn from it, I'm sure. But that was the pivotal game. Of course it was, because of the fact that we expect Portugal to be so dominant. But that's not to say let's write this competition off already. It's become a mountain to climb. Of course it has. But we should still be fighting to get there, as opposed to trying to create something in 4 or 5 years' time.
Is there an element of the system, Gary, that is to blame for Dusan Tadic playing really well yesterday? Is there something more that Stephen Kenny can be doing to nullify a very obvious threat in the opposition?
Well, Owen, he wasn't that influential. Listen, he's a very good player. I know we saw a lot of the dummies, the body swerves and stuff like that, but the setup was good. But having said that, it was at times against Slovakia. It certainly was in the opening 15 minutes against England. But then what changes is that these better players, the likes of Tadic, and certainly with the English players with Mason Mount and Grealish, they work out where the space is. And that's what you have to learn, is that we're starting games well and we're looking very well coached and stuff like that. But then you can't hold the players' hands. They have to learn and sense danger themselves. And if I'm looking at that system that we played last night, I was really encouraged by it. I liked it, I did. But I could see straight away where there can be improvements in terms of the fact that I think a lot of the lads who are playing Championship football and certainly not playing the Premier League, and Alan Brown I thought was excellent. But there are times when the ball's on the other side of the pitch where it's nowhere really near him, and he's not the only one, and our players just don't get back into good enough positions early. It's as if they feel that, in a Championship, and I've played in Championship, teams don't hurt you that way. But certainly at international level, they can be working and jabbing you in certain places of the pitch, but it's just to create an opening 40 or 50 yards on the other side of you. And I think we need to coach that a bit better. I think that will be done. I've no doubt it will be. But that penny needs to drop very quickly, because these players will work out where the space is, and Tadic did it brilliantly last night. The
first goal and the third goal are prevented if Ireland win a header. The second goal, it's a young goalkeeper. It's a phenomenal finish from Mitrovic. But the first and the third one, Gary, from a centre back's perspective, is there a more dominant showing from John Egan, perhaps to win both of those headers? Perhaps you see down the line, or how did you see those? Essentially, who's to blame here for those?
Well, the frustration for me, more than anything, in terms of we talk about the creativity and the technical players in international football, Tadic and stuff like that, is that it wasn't a goal, that first goal that was played through the first. In fact, it was the type of goal that, as Premier League players, Championship players, we should be able to deal with. It was just it was a hopeful ball, wasn't it? That kind of chip up to Tadic, who gambles inside, wins a header against Kieran Clark, and the ball's quite flat. So people will say a dominant centre-half should be dealing with that. Yeah, they should be, but it does happen. O'Shea's body position, I've heard, some of my former teammates saying he's in a bad body position. He's not, because if he actually, where his body shape is, where the head is inside him, Owen, if he actually turns that way and looks at what's happening, he's not going to see the player. So your natural position is to go there, look for the ball, but he's just done by a bit more pace. And if I was to coach Dara there in terms of the situation, I think certainly someone like Kenny Cunningham, who wasn't blessed with pace, never got himself level with players. He'd even make the decision that, okay, my other centre-half, if it was me or Richard Dunn, if they're going to compete for the ball and the other centre-forward is looking to run in behind, Kenny would make the decision, okay, I'll drop to bring him onto me and then I'd step him up offside. If he felt that the run was good enough that it was going to stay onside, which it was last night, then Dara's got to drop a little bit 2 yards just to give him that ability to see the situation in front and to react and not get beaten in for pace. But he's a young centre-half. He's going to learn those things, and I think he will get better for it. The third goal, people can talk about, and I've heard this, that Shane Duffy wouldn't have been beaten the way Clark was. Mitrovic has got up so early, Owen, that I don't care if you're the best centre-half in the world at jumping. If the centre-forward gets up early and leans into you, you can't jump. Now, people will say, well, it wouldn't happen to Duffy. It has happened to Duffy. We saw Maguire dominating for the goal for England. I've seen players do it to him, and as good as he is, it can happen. So they're the frustrations, they're the fine lines, and this is the difference when you're playing at elite level, is that when you don't get those things right, you'll be punished and you'll lose the game.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the positives then, Gary. What are you going to take away from that and say there's something there that we're building on? Like you mentioned Dara O'Shea. Phil was on a little bit earlier on talking about O'Shea picking the ball up very early on and being very brave with the pass out. And it was like, well, this is a kid, essentially, first full start in a big competitive game like this. And he's like, yeah, I can do this. Yeah,
well, he can. But Ger, he can do it because you've been doing it for the 21s. And it's not a case of him having to be really brave to do it. It's within his skill set. He can do it. And I loved a couple of occasions where he got the ball, big switches of play to the left, then again to the right. And it just unnerves the opposition because they think they want to flood the Ireland defence because they've probably done a bit of homework and think, listen, if you do that to Ireland, they can't pass through. They can't get out of the press. He done it brilliantly. And I really enjoyed seeing that. There was one occasion in the first half as well where he got the ball, fired it into Malumbi. Malumbi gets on a half turn, drives forward, passes it out to Doherty, and suddenly within two passes, we're in the final third. Doherty gives a ball away cheaply, but it was so encouraging that, and I really enjoyed it. Flip side of that as well, Ger, is that we didn't do it every time, because if you do it every time, the opportunity just go, okay, they're going to do it. They get right on top of you, and they narrow the passing channels that you want to try and play for. A couple of times we went long, we varied it, and you have to do that. It's all well and good saying about philosophy, and you can have this ideal that you've worked on in the classroom and in coaching courses, but the reality is very different, and I felt we'd done it really well.
I think that kind of speaks to one of the big questions about Stephen Kenny from the very start here. And there's been this kind of, I don't know how much attention you've been paying to the bizarre campaign of leaks that have been coming about, unhappiness. And then Seamus Coleman nailed them in the press conference 2 days ago and put in a performance. And the team put in a performance that was clearly, as you've said, well coached. It strikes me that all of those question marks that people rightly have about a new international manager, not all of them, but the vast majority of them have been answered. This is a team who is well coached, who has an idea of what they're trying to do, who are progressive, and who are playing close enough to what you would expect that group of players to play. That's what you want from your international team. I mean, obviously a win would be brilliant, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's no significant issues around the management that we can point to and say, well, they're not doing their job, they haven't done their research, they haven't coached the team properly, they've ballsed up the selection, it's all a bit chaotic. There's no sign of that now.
No, there's no sign of... I certainly agree with that. And when I talked about how we were set up defensively, and I don't mean just the defence, I mean offensively in terms of stopping the opposition playing through, it was well coached and it was well executed. Now, the quality of players are always going to try and pick holes in it. That's the nature of it, international football. But it was in stark contrast to... having 10 men behind the ball, camped on our edge of our box, last-ditch tackles. Now there is an argument, Ger, because people will say, well, hold on a minute. We didn't concede 3 goals when we played that way. We won in Austria, we won in Wales, we had positive results. And now I've always said that you would be hard-pressed, even with the most expansive, brilliant footballing team, to kind of mirror some of the results that we did get away from home under Martin O'Neill. So for people who are still supportive of him, that's the argument. And it's always going to be the argument as long as we don't win games. Now, you said there, it'd be great to have a win, but for me, Ger, there's no but. We have to win games. You know, I think Serbia are a talented group. I think they were very complacent in terms of their team selection, that they left some of their better players rested, what appears to be, for the game against Portugal, and they nearly got found out by it. At the time, I was thinking, I hope you really do. But again, you said about but. It's a very big but. We have to win games.
Yeah, that would have been unbelievably satisfying had Ireland actually got the job done, and you would have saw like Milinkovic, Savic and the boys on the bench. Like Gary, when it comes to maybe the immediate comparisons between the last campaign, certainly one of my frustrations would have been the performance away to Georgia, for example. That games that Ireland, you would have felt, should have been winning because of the way they were approaching the games. Maybe they actually couldn't get over the line. Is there a sense that this style of football now gives them a better opportunity to get 12 points out of Azerbaijan and Luxembourg and those 4 games?
Yeah, well, listen, they have to, and that is the hope. And I agree with you, Owen, in terms of I couldn't catch my breath when I saw Georgia dominating possession against us at Lansdowne that time in one of the previous campaigns. And you're right. And people think, well, you know, the better teams dominate us. Well, the lesser teams were dominating us back then because of how passive we were in terms of pressing in that front part of the pitch, and then what we were looking to do in the midfield and in the reaction to it defensively. I really liked it. I agree with you. But I think football has gone that way anyway. I don't think it's just a situation just akin to Ireland. I think we were probably late to the party in terms of how we wanted to play. And I didn't believe that we couldn't play that. I've never believed that. I've never believed that if you can't coach players, I think we've seen it with Manchester City. You're coaching the best players in the world and they're becoming better. So why would we think that, you know, just because we got lesser players, you can't coach them better? You can. And I think we're seeing an indication of that. I like the 3 at the back system because of the fact that I think it gives you that extra centre half. I think there was a number of occasions where Chambers came over and covered well when forwards got down the side of us. I like the fact that the wing backs are there. But ultimately, I like the fact that it gives you an offensive threat. And there was a couple of occasions where we set the trap, the ball goes into midfield, we nick it, and from there, Owen, 5 players are sprinting forward with real pace, real verve, real energy. And it was so unsettling for the Serbians. They were like, oh, wow, I'm not playing that risky passing there anymore because this team breaks at pace. And it must have been so different to what they had been coached or certainly told about this Irish team. And certainly maybe very different to what they experienced, 5 years ago in that 2-2 draw. But they were the things that I thought, oh, brilliant. The goal was, I mean, it was a brilliant goal. It really was. The header was sensational. The fact that the cross was stood up there. So I think it's an obvious thought process to say, well, listen, if we're playing against lesser quality, like you've just identified those 2 teams, we should be winning comfortably. And I think that is it. And that's the challenge. And that's the pressure as well, because we'll all expect that now.
It sounds like you're a fan of the back 3/back 5, and you will be keeping it for this weekend.
Well, listen, I'm not a fan. I really don't nail my colours to any mast in terms of what system you play. I hope I've been consistent in this. I just want it coached well. And I could see straight away that was coached well. Now, everyone will say, well, how did he do that within a couple of days? You can do it. If you've got good coaches, it's easy to get it. I'll say it's relatively easy to get the message across. You do it in different ways. You might not have time on a training field, but you do it away from in terms of videos. You talk things through. You explain situations to them. And there's a lot of players there that know the trigger points anyway in terms of playing that way for their club. So it does add up that, you know, they were going to do well with it. And I liked it. I did like it. I think it covers a couple of the vulnerabilities we have at times. I think it does. And certainly I think it gives us more of a foothold going forward as well.
The concern, obviously, that people have rightly had is that Ireland don't have a goal scorer at the moment. Now, 2 goals last night. Do you look at either of those and think to yourself, there is something here that is being well coached and is a product of the system that is going to produce more goals as this campaign goes on?
I do certainly, as I said there, and I think it's very noticeable that on the occasions we got in and around the box, we could have had 4 or 5 players in the box. Now, if you look back over the last 3 or 4 years, there have really been times where whoever was up front was so isolated to the extent I said, I don't think Robbie Keane could score in that goal in his heyday, because everyone talks about Robbie as our greatest goal scorer, and he was, there's no doubt about it. But Robbie Keane wasn't picking the ball up at left back and beating 10 players like Messi and bending it in the top corner. He was on the end of chances that the team had created. Listen, he was a great finisher, of course he was. But I think that's the remit now, that this team creates chances for whoever are in those offensive positions to score goals. Now, we saw it with Brown getting in the box. And, I mean, I liked him. I really did. I like the fact that he has that energy, that strength to get forward into those attacking positions. But I like the fact that he can drop back into midfield and just thicken us up a little bit there, because of the fact that top teams can pass and find pockets in that midfield. And I think if you just have 1 or 2, you can get outgunned in there. So, yeah, lots of positives. I really do think that. But I am aware, and it's not my heart rule in my head. I'm aware that this is 9 games now without a win.
Yeah, like it's interesting that Alan Brown is almost picked out as one of the most threatening players for Ireland. And I hate to go back to the Conor Hourhan chance against Slovakia for the millionth time, but it is interesting that it's players arriving late to the box that seems to be their biggest threat almost.
Yeah, well, I mean, even in McGoldrick's time, it wasn't a case of McGoldrick running across the near post against centre-half, was it? It was more often than not him dropping into 10 and then people running in behind him. So I think that is something that we need to address. Connolly up front, Robinson, they give you that mobility, certainly. Got a little bit frustrated with Aaron at times, though, because there was a ball early on in that first half. It was a lovely ball played down the side by Malumbi, and he didn't chase it. It wasn't going out of play. It was always going to make the goalkeeper or the centre-half have to make a decision, which we saw with a minute to go in the game, that mistakes can happen. And he's looking back at Malumbi, I think, was the pass, and throwing his arms up. And I'm thinking, just run around you. And that's what you want from me. You want that. I want that kind of, that kind of attitude that he's got within his game. But I still want him to be chasing down things there. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed.
So on balance, it's more positive than negative, Gary.
It is, Ger. It is. Of course it is. And I always want to be that way. I've always said that in the difficult times now, I want to be supportive of this manager. And prior to the game, Ger, I was saying, I asked Vinny Perth when I was speaking to him the other day with Joe, what is Stephen Kenny going to do now? Because there was a suggestion that he's got to go more pragmatic because of the fact that he's got to get through these troubled waters, navigate a path through there, and not be like looking to play football in and around his own box with this idealistic philosophy, whatever, because it's not realistic. So I asked him the question, would he stay true to his beliefs? And he did. I felt he did last night. And I was delighted with that, because I think if you suddenly start throwing out your beliefs, those players straight away go, hold on a minute. Well, if you don't believe it, how are we going to believe it? And I think there was certainly murmurings of discontent within the supporters, but it can't be within the changing room. And I felt last night that they believed in what they were doing. I believe that they do feel as a group of players that they're on the cusp of something. And I've been in this situation before, Ger, where you think, something's about to happen. Now, the results might totally dismiss that, where you're thinking, well, that don't make sense. But you feel something is about to happen. Now, they're talking about that their confidence is high. And we can say, well, listen, on the back of 8 games without a win prior to this one, how can it be? But it can be, because I think they do believe in what they're trying to achieve. But they've got to start winning games.
Hopefully the first one comes on Saturday. Gary, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Thanks, lads. Good luck.
Gary Breen with us there, and loads of comments coming in on 0879 180 180. Porrick says, surely we need to be thinking long term if we haven't qualified for a World Cup in nearly 2 decades. That's a big rock that you've just lifted there, Porrick, and the creepy crawlies underneath it include funding for kids, facilities, investment in coaching, all that kind of stuff. In the short term, they've got the job to try and win some games, as Gary Breen pointed out there. Patrick says, need to bring in experience quicker in the game. The subs were too late. Kieran says, we scored 2 away goals. We were beaten by a decent team, a lot better than we're used to. I don't think we'll be qualifying, but well done to the squad and Kenny. And James says, when I turned the TV off last night, I had a sense of regret, but also pride in the performance. Kenny year has been awful until last night. It was a good performance filled with positivity. I do think that we kind of overrate those Nations Cup, Nations League games by investing a lot of time analysing what's happening, particularly the ones that 20 players missed because of COVID. Last night, you got the opportunity to see what the football team is going to look like under Stephen Kenny at the end of a campaign that he wasn't even supposed to have in the first place. So this is the start, really, of the Kenny era. And, you make your mind up. A lot of people don't think that's good enough. A lot of people think that we should have just put 10 men behind the ball and tried to eke out a 0-0 draw. And maybe there's a case that is the way for international football to be played. Not many of us would actually pay to watch that. And I think it was interesting that Owen started the show this morning by saying he would pay to watch this football team at the moment. Good question to throw out there. Would you pay to watch this football team? 0879 180 180 is the number. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We're back talking football with Vinny Perth at around about 8:40. But up next, Dr. Noel McCaffrey and Dr. Cathy Kelly are going to join us as we kick off the Irish Cancer Society takeover of OTB, sponsored by Novartis Ireland.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB. Bemused, I think, is probably how he feels in his head. Bemused to how they could go from where they were last season, 99 points, 67 games unbeaten at home, to a situation where they could be on the edge today of losing 6 games in a row at home.
OTB live commentary. Never miss the action right here on OTB Sports Radio. Keep up to date with the latest scores on the OTB Sports app. The OTB Sports app. Live score updates straight to your phone.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Right, Dr. Cathy Kelly and Dr. Noel McCaffrey are going to join us next. First, here is Stewie Byrne talking about Matt Doherty.
What about the team selection and the system he went with? They 3 at the back, managed to get both Seamus Coleman and Matt Doherty into the team. Was it the right system when you look at how the game planned out?
You would say it's the right system for that first 60 minutes, wouldn't you? Because we've scored a wonderful team goal. Brown took his goal really, really well, and I thought we had a really good shape on our team. If you want to nitpick at a couple of things, well, you might say Matt Doherty has he showed up tonight? He's supposed to be our best player. £15 million signing for Tottenham. Didn't see much of him tonight. An off night for him, and we know he's got a lot more quality than that. So, you have to look at the performances of some of the other players. Cullen, Malumbi, Brown. I think they stood up tonight. O'Shea, Clark, very good at the back. Coleman was excellent, really, really top notch tonight. But we ultimately came across a Serbian team that just had that extra bit of quality, really. And what we needed at that time was just to see out a 15-20 minute spell where we were going to take on pressure, and we didn't. We've conceded the second goal.
That extra bit of attacking quality is something that Ireland have lacked under Mick McCarthy, under Martin O'Neill, really since Robbie Keane left the scene. That even those chances after half time were half chances, there were decent balls in, that there was no real clinical edge. That's not going to change. So what does Stephen Kenny do? Do you think any of these players can suddenly emerge with that level of quality over the next couple of years?
I mean, you look at the likes of Adam Ida, Troy Parrott. They're all on the kind of periphery there. You'd like to kind of bring them through, wouldn't you? But I don't think that's going to happen in time for to maybe change Stephen's look, for want of a better phrase. I think we have to go with the players that we have at the moment, and the type of football and the system that we want to play, and I can only see us getting better, Nathan. I don't see us stepping back here. I can see us moving forward.
Yeah, so look, the conversation around Matt Doherty is something that is very live. Unfortunately, he didn't play well last night, up to the standard that we would have hoped. But at the same time, we have definitely come up with a formation that will give him the opportunity to thrive. So we'd love to hear from you about that. And we'll talk about that in a bit more detail with Vinny Perth in about 20 minutes' time. 0879 180 180 is the number if you want to get in touch with us. And of course, you can always leave a comment on the YouTube channel for us as well. Now, I want to move on because we have a very special panel coming your way a little bit later on this evening on Off the Ball. We're going to be having a Living Well and Beyond with Cancer panel. This is all in association with the Irish Cancer Society. It's supported by Novartis Ireland, and it's an OTB Sports takeover day today across all of our channels and all of our platforms. And we're really happy to be supporting this because it's a hugely important issue, particularly at the moment. And we'll get into why in just a second. So our panel this evening is going to include Tony Ward, Mary Cullen and Noel McCaffrey. And it's that time of the year when the Irish Cancer Society are raising badly needed funds. For more details and to donate, check out cancer.ie. The Irish Cancer Society support line is a supportive information service staffed by experienced cancer nurses where anybody concerned about cancer can get trusted information and advice about any type of cancer. You can call free phone 1-800-200-700 or email supportline@irishcancer.ie. I'm delighted to say with us this morning are Dr. Cathy Kelly, who's a consultant oncologist at the Mater Hospital in Dublin, and Dr. Noel McCaffrey, a sports and exercise medicine specialist and the CEO of Exwell Medical. You're both very welcome. Noel, if I could start with you, you might tell us a little bit about what Exwell is and what the innovation is there, please.
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for having us on the show. So Exwell Medical is a social enterprise which offers structured exercise programs to people with different long-term, also called chronic illnesses. The rationale being that a lot of the unwellness in any long-term illness is in fact caused by becoming deconditioned or unfit, either because the patient becomes afraid of exercise or nervous about it, or because they're actually told to become less active. And we run a big program in many centres with lots of partners and supporters in different areas of industry and medicine around the country. And I suppose a key element of what we do, or an important element of what we do, is cancer. Even though cancer in some instances is not a long-term illness, by which I mean it is cured. But we do a lot of work in helping people with different types of cancer to either remain active if they previously were active before their diagnosis, or to become active if they previously were not active. And in both cases, this has a major impact on their wellness through the cancer journey. And recently, with the help of Novartis, we are partnering with the Mater and the Cathy's team to try to embed an exercise offering as part of the routine care of all cancer patients passing through the Mater service, and hopefully the services of other centres as well. And as part of a broader, I suppose, offering within the broader cancer cohort that is non-breast cancer patients, exercise is increasingly recognised as having a critical role in enhancing wellness through the treatment pathway and in preparing people to do well around surgical treatment of cancers.
Cathy, could you talk to us a bit about that and just explain what difference an exercise program around surgery might make for a cancer patient?
Yeah, it's huge. We firstly, when Noel came to us and talked to us about this program, I have to say the whole cancer team, from surgeons to medical oncologists to all our nurses, everyone, we absolutely jumped at the chance. It's the response and the enthusiasm around it among us and patients is absolutely enormous. In terms of cancer, we would in treating cancer, firstly we would think of exercise and physical activity as a way to prevent developing cancer. So that's why it's so important that everybody should be physically active. And then for our cancer patients, if they develop a cancer, we know that regular structured exercise, as Noel describes, can improve their long-term survival, which is the ultimate goal, but it'll also help them tolerate all of the treatments. For example, the surgeries I'm not involved in, I'm more involved in our breast cancer side of things, but I know my lung cancer colleagues and the lung surgeons, all of the patients going for lung cancer surgeries now see Noel and go through a program, and it certainly gets them through fitter and gets them through their surgery better and on the road to recovery quicker. In terms of the treatments I give, like chemotherapies and immunotherapies, and they can often cause a fatigue, and certainly exercising and maintaining your level of exercise while you're receiving those treatments really improves how you can tolerate them. In terms of the psychosocial impact of physical activity, it's enormous, and I see it and have seen it over the years when we've referred patients for various exercise programs, that the positive benefits, not just in terms of their physical activity, but just the social aspect of it, the effect on their mood, their confidence. So we were really happy that for the Mater Foundation here, which is our official fundraising body in the Mater Hospital, and through the supports that we get for, in this instance, the breast cancer wellness program, that we're able to also from the Mater side support this program. And I think what Noel said was key, that really it has to be embedded in the treatment pathway. It's a treatment and it's not an extra. It's crucial. It should be a pillar of our cancer therapy. So this is something that we're going to work strongly on with Noel over the coming years.
On that social aspect you mentioned there, Cathy, is it a sense that most people feel that they should be resting and resting is all they should be doing? It often depends a little bit on the person, how physically active they were before their diagnosis, the impact of their cancer treatments, etc. But I'm we're increasingly saying to patients to remain active and don't just stop all that good work and that good physical activity you have been doing when you start your treatment. Try as much as possible to maintain it, and I guess that's where Noel and his team are going to help them to do that, to maintain that. And certainly if they haven't been physically active, that now is the time to really start. So we're moving away from trying to wrap people up in cotton wool and tell them not to do anything. They really, for their health and long-term benefit, have to exercise. I'm sure there's no one-size-fits-all approach, Noel, but is there particular exercises that you focus on, or any particular elements of a training program that you generally roll out for the majority of people?
Really good question, and I think the answer to that is that in broad terms, everybody needs probably three components to their exercise. That's a mixture of strength work, of aerobic exercise, and also core stability and balance. And different elements of that are, I suppose, more important in different age groups. So it is more important, for example, to focus on balance in people who are that bit frailer, maybe older. Although the really interesting thing is that some of the side effects of treatment in the cancer pathway would include a thing called peripheral neuropathy, where the nerves are damaged by some of the chemotherapy treatments. And that can lead to unsteadiness and a bit of clumsiness, and working on improving balance can be very important in that grouping. I'd just like to touch back on one thing that Cathy said, which is the psychological element here is probably as important as the physical element. And what people tell us who've been on the programs are that being involved in exercise following completing cancer treatment can be really important in resuming a normal existence, in terms of things as simple as getting out of the house, driving again, getting dressed again. These little milestones, which might seem trivial to us, but which are actually very, very important. And the other main group that describe enormous benefit is those who are preparing for curative cancer surgery. And so if you get your diagnosis of breast cancer today, or prostate cancer, or whatever, and you meet our team tomorrow, literally, because of the network and referral pathway that's there, and you exercise intensely every day up until your surgery, and literally we wave you off to the surgery as a group before you go. The most important benefit that people describe to us of that is that it is something to do, rather than sitting around looking out the window waiting for the grim day to arrive. And the other thing is, you meet people on the same journey, and even more importantly, you see people who've come back for their post-operative treatment and they're still alive and they're doing well. And that whole thing manages to reduce the fear of surgery, which is really, really important. And what we're finding now is that there are so many excellent groups around the country interested in this, so many of the support groups, the Irish Cancer Society, ARC, hospital groups that have a big interest in enhancing wellness through exercise, such as UPMC in the Southeast, which is a brilliant embedded exercise program for prostate and all sorts of cancers. It's becoming much more mainstream, and some of our research would show that if you don't exercise in the pre-surgical period when you're having chemotherapy or radiotherapy, your fitness plummets. And if you apply an exercise program at the end of the treatment phase, in the interval between that and the surgery, you can dramatically improve your fitness, restore it back to where it was before your chemoradiotherapy started. And that has a major impact on preparing you for surgery and reducing your likelihood of complications of the surgery and enhancing your recovery afterwards. So I mean, we've been at this for a long time, but you can imagine how delighted we were when Novartis actually reached out to us and said, we'd like to work with you on this program on one condition, that it's a long-term relationship. We never hear that. It was an amazing approach. We were just thrilled. And then we went to the matter, and Cathy's team could not have been more excited. And we've been working with breast cancer for quite a long time, but we're now putting a structure on it. And what Cathy said is to embed it as normal care, as well as meeting the consultant, as well as being treated with different things. By the way, there's your exercise program, and you have to do it. You have to opt out rather than opt in. That's big news for us and for all of our partners. It's great stuff. It really is very exciting.
It sounds now like the social side of it is almost the psychological thing is a diagnosis like this, I can only imagine, leaves you feeling very isolated and alone. And obviously there are support networks out there, but actually physically being in the presence of other people or being part of a group of people who are going through the same, it's that team element, I suppose. You kind of lean a little bit on that fact that we all perform better in teams generally, especially when we're striving towards a goal.
Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. And I think the consistent feedback we've got, and it's a really privileged position for us all to be in, to be working with these groups. But the sense of gratitude and restoration of hope and the peer support that they get from people going through the same journey. And unlike other illnesses in our program, where we feel there's a benefit actually mixing up people with different illnesses, so that they're sort of not over-consumed by their own medical problem, and they see people with different conditions who may be a little bit worse off than them. We tend to sort of mix up the other chronic illnesses in our classes rather than run specific programs for specific diagnoses. The exception is cancer. And the reason for that is that the peer support is so consistently amazing, and it is so immediate that if we get a group of strangers into an induction session for the XWell program, within 5 minutes, if it's a cancer program, they're having really heartfelt, deep and meaningful conversations with colleagues they've never met before about their situation. And it is incredible, the friendships and the supports that grow over a period of 12 weeks on an exercise program. Now, obviously with COVID, there's the challenge then of trying to reproduce that social interaction and respect the guidelines of the public health efforts in tackling it. And that has been a challenge. But to some extent, I suppose, the big challenge in chronic illness rehab in general is to continue carrying it out in the COVID era, because it's even more important, as like touching on a slightly different topic, the deconditioning of cocooners is an amazing problem and a big problem, but it applies as well to cancer patients who would have the additional fear, being a vulnerable group, maybe of coming together in the first place in COVID. So that whole challenge is sort of, I suppose, a current one, which hopefully will be resolved with vaccinations and everything, and leave us back in this space that is growing rapidly of offering exercise as a core treatment in the cancer journey, no matter what stage which you're at. And that includes advanced cancer. It includes that group as well who are really interested in experiencing normal exercise again, maybe not pursuing improvements in fitness in the same way that other groups on the cancer pathway would, but having an equally important impact on their quality of life.
Cathy, are these conversations straightforward? Does everybody understand them immediately when you begin to say, look, here's your diagnosis and the shock, and immediately we're going to get you exercising? Is it a straightforward conversation, or are people like, here, listen, you just give me this very bad news and now you're telling me I've got to go and run some laps?
No, like what generally happens is, you know, I'll go through their cancer diagnosis and their prognosis, possibly, if they're asking questions about that, and we'll go through that in detail, and then we'll talk about the treatment and treatment options and potential side effects of treatment and pros and cons of different treatments, and quite commonly at that point, patients will say, okay, I'll take this treatment, but what can I do? What can I be doing? And that's usually the opening when you say, well, what you can be doing is you can be maintaining your fitness and being physically active. And I guess up until when Noel came with this program, I wasn't able to say, well, and here's the program, and this is what you should do, and this is what I could recommend, and this is what will be best for you. And I guess the excitement we're feeling is that now we can say, yes, you know, you have to be physically active, and here's what you do, and we can hand that thankfully over to Noel to take charge of that. But no, I mean, the patients are so they know, and they're delighted with it, and you know, patients are turning up on Noel's door before we even referred them now at this stage. So I think everyone's chomping at the bit to get started. So yeah.
Noel, I did want to ask about the stereotypical Irish male who will, you know, notice something is amiss and repress that information for a good long period of time until it's absolutely imminent or something urgent is happening. How do we convince Irish men to be a bit more engaged with their health issues, and are we getting any better?
That's a really interesting question, and I mightn't be the best expert to answer that one, but I think, and maybe Cathy can help here, I think what is happening is that cancer, which used to be a very sobering diagnosis and one which came with almost like a death sentence, sort of atmosphere around it, that's changed fundamentally, because the cure rates and the survival rates are jumping through the sky, really, and very often cancer is now being viewed as either a completely curable illness or a long-term illness, like other long-term illnesses. And so that in itself, I think, is percolating through, so that people are becoming maybe less afraid of addressing it. I'm not sure if Cathy would agree with that, but I think that would be our experience, that it's the dark side of it, or the real worry about it, is becoming a bit less. Now, I suppose there is still a journey to go, and it may simply be that not so much people are afraid of a diagnosis, but they're just not aware of the significance of maybe a testicular swelling or loss of appetite, or symptoms that might mean something to us that they just don't understand or appreciate. So the educational bit around that, if you have an alarming or a symptom that would worry the medical profession, and those key things would be sort of weight loss or loss of appetite or night pain or an unusual swelling, particularly a solid swelling which is slowly enlarging, things like that, or bleeding which is unexplained, should prompt people to go and have it looked at. And I think myself that the fear of it is becoming a little less as time is passing. I suppose one other thing that I wouldn't mind touching on is the fact that there are certain symptoms of cancer which present challenges around exercise. And I mean, to briefly go through them, fatigue is one. You know, the cancer-related fatigue is fatigue which is characteristically not relieved by a night's sleep. And interestingly, exercise does not make it worse. In fact, you can make it better if the exercise is appropriate. So that the idea of fatigue being a barrier to exercise is not true, nor is pain, which can be a feature of cancer and indeed of other conditions. But pain itself is not necessarily a barrier to taking part in exercise. And there are ways around managing pain in terms of, you know, the time of day you do it, the sort of exercises you do, strapping that you use, or, you know, pre-exercise stretching or this and that. Then I mentioned the peripheral neuropathy one earlier on. That again is not a barrier. So lymphedema is swelling of a limb which occurs usually in the upper limb of breast cancer patients, which is a real concern to patients because it tends to be a lifelong challenge of dealing with it, and it's explained by interruption of the lymphatic pathway by surgery or by radiation. Again, exercise not only does not make it worse, but can make it better. So there are very, very few contraindications to exercise in cancer. And most people can do something. And that's a very important point. It's not a matter in our program of, do you qualify to attend? It's more, what will you do when you attend, rather than can you attend? Now that said, obviously there are situations where there are risks and there are concerns, but we're aware of those, and we will help patients to take part in some way to suit their ability.
Whatever is appropriate, of course.
Yeah.
Cathy, did you want to come in there on the issue of people getting checked?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and we are all concerned with COVID and people cocooning, that people and with the interruptions to our screening programs, that maybe there are people out there who are experiencing some of the symptoms that Noel has mentioned that aren't coming forward to get checked. And so I'd really encourage them, and especially men who sometimes tend to hang on and not present, that they go to their GP or call their GP and let them know. And in most cases, it will turn out to be nothing. In terms of definitely cancer, thankfully through the Irish Cancer Society and many different organisations, and just because we have more programs like this and are talking about it a bit more, that it isn't such a frightening diagnosis, and that that most patients thankfully are cured of their cancer. We've over 200,000 cancer survivors in the country, and then patients who unfortunately whose cancer does come back, and many of those, we're referring to Noel's program, and they have normal quality of life and they continue to work. And a lot of the treatment, people tend to think, oh God, the treatment's going to be chemotherapy, and certainly for some people it will be chemotherapy and there will be side effects, but often the treatments we're giving now have very few side effects, or some of our immunotherapy drugs that are single agent, that I have 80 and even 90-year-old patients coming in and getting these treatments, and they're not experiencing any side effects. And there's before I took this call, I was on our skin cancer meeting, and most of our patients are in their 80s and 90s, and often really physically active and very much wanting to get any treatment possible to prolong their lives. So yes, I think cancer is a diagnosis of cancer is always going to be frightening, and it is frightening, but in most cases, especially if someone presents early, the outcomes are good. Patients can go on and live normal life expectancies and be cured of their cancer. And in those cases where cancers return, our treatments are getting better and better, and have gotten better. And many people with metastatic or advanced cancers, they need to be focusing on their other illnesses as well, because you want to survive your cancer and your heart disease and diabetes. So all of these things are linked, and that's why our treatments and a treatment now, which is exercise, are all linked in and so important.
That makes a whole heap of sense. Guys, great to have you with us this morning. Thanks a million for being so generous with your time. That's Dr. Noel McCaffrey and Dr. Cathy Kelly there. You're listening to the OTB Sports Takeover. It's a full day in association with the Irish Cancer Society, supported by Novartis Ireland. Now, later on this evening and off the ball, we're going to have a Living Well and Beyond with Cancer panel alongside Tony Ward, Mary Cullen and Noel McGrath. It's that time of the year when the Irish Cancer Society are raising badly needed funds. For more details and to donate, check out cancer.ie. The Irish Cancer Society support line is a supportive information service staffed by experienced cancer nurses, where anyone concerned about cancer can get trusted information and advice about any type of cancer. Call free phone 1-800-200-700 or email supportline@irishcancer.ie. It is 8:45 this morning here on OTB AM. John Duggan, good morning to you.
Ger Eoin, how are we doing?
Where are we starting?
Well, only one place to start. Belgrade, guys. 3-2 defeat to Serbia in the first World Cup qualifier last night. The boys in green opening the scoring through Alan Brown, but Serbia leveled by the break, and 2 goals from Alexander Mitrovic saw them home. James Collins found the net late on for Ireland's second goal. Manager Stephen Kenny remaining without a win in 9 games ahead of the visit of Luxembourg to Dublin on Saturday. Captain Seamus Coleman says a frustrating night despite some good spells.
Ultimately, if you concede 3 goals at this level, chances are you lose the game. So that's massively disappointing. But you know, there is a lot of positives to take. I thought we tried to play out from the back. We done it well at times. I think we probably could have still stayed a bit braver as the game went on. But we'll learn from that, I'm sure. And you know, we're disappointed. Some good performances individually, but we wanted to come here and win the game, and we haven't done that. So that's a disappointment.
Now elsewhere in Group A, Portugal 1-0 winners over Azerbaijan. The only goal of the game, a first half own goal. Harry Wilson put Wales ahead away to Belgium last night, but the hosts rallied to start life in Group E with a 3-1 victory in tonight's qualifiers. Northern Ireland away to Italy, England hosting San Marino, Scotland up against Austria. And after opening day defeats, Shane Lowry facing John Ram, Rory McIlroy taking on Lanto Griffin at the WGC match play in Texas later. Porter Carrington, Gray McDowell and Seamus Power in the field for the Corrales Championship in the Dominican Republic. The last semi-final spot up for grabs at the Tour Championship today in snooker. Judd Trump taking on Barry Hawkins for the right to play Ronnie O'Sullivan. Last night saw Mark Selby complete a 10-5 victory over Kyron Wilson to set up a semi-final date with Neil Robertson, and the night race card at Cork this afternoon, first going to post at 2.
John, what are you writing about this week?
Stephen Kenny last night, and my belief that we need to give him time and maybe think a little bit differently in terms of how we evaluate Republic of Ireland managers. It's the biggest job in Irish sport. It comes with a lot of pressure. We live in a 24/7 news cycle. We live in a frustrated time, accelerated by the pandemic. We need to give Stephen Kenny the space and the time to build, because I was impressed by some of what I saw last night. We lost the match. We've no wins in 9, but I do think Stephen Kenny plays football the way football should be played, and I think a more realistic ambition is to qualify for the Euros. Forget about Qatar. Let's try and build something with Stephen Kenny.
But John, the question that was asked of Kenny in the press conferences, there's been several asked along the lines of, do you not think we should just shut up shop? Stick 10 men behind the ball and draw 0-0. What's wrong with you, Stephen?
Well, that's what happened with Trapattoni and O'Neill. And what happened to Euro? Was there anything redeeming out of Euro 2012? Nothing, in my view. We qualified for a major tournament.
John. We sang songs.
We sang songs and we went on the Loch in Poznan. A jolly, so what? You want to be going to international tournaments and being competitive and playing football the right way. And in the column I quoted Danny Blanchflower, the great fallacies of the game is first and last about winning. It's nothing of the kind. The game is about glory. It's about doing things in style with a flourish, about going out and beating the other lot, not waiting for them to die of boredom. We've had too many boom and bust cycles with the Republic of Ireland, all about qualifying for a major tournament. What happens then? We need to be able to go to major tournaments in the future, and obviously at the moment we're at a low base in terms of quality. We saw that with Tadic and Mitrovic last night. But at times, with the Brown goal was a fantastic goal. There was a moment in the second half we put a string of passes together. We pressed, we ran out of puff, but there was something there. There was a genesis, there was a green shoot there that I felt, you know what, if we beat Luxembourg and Azerbaijan home and away, that's a successful campaign for me.
And look, the thing is, we might not beat Luxembourg home and away. You know, the results of that, in which case the pressure will ramp up again. But I think the point you're making is that there's some long-term thinking. Our senior international team plays in a style that's similar to all of our underage teams, and perhaps we're beginning to build players and a style of play that suits our temperament, that suits our skill set, that suits our technical proficiencies.
Yes. And to be fair to Kenny, he was pragmatic, because Kenny was banging the drum all last year about 4-3-3. Last night he went to 3-5-2 because he felt that, you know what, we need Doherty and Stevens on the pitch in the better positions. We need Coleman in the team. And he was brilliant, Coleman. But also there's lots of things I touched upon in the column. Life has changed from the Ray Houghton, Roy Keane, Damien Duff league winners. We're in the shadow of a global league. It's harder for players to break into it. we have the competition of Gaelic games and soccer and rugby in addition to soccer in the country. We have a population of less than 5 million. Look at Cullen going to Anderlecht, playing week in, week out, and played really well last night. Brown is playing week in, week out. And to be fair to Kenny, he made brave decisions, and people are saying to me on Twitter, well, Duffy would have defended better than Clark for some of the goals. But Kenny is sticking to his principles. He has the courage of his convictions. Maybe he'll die and fall on that sword and die in it. But at the moment, I think that we need to just think a little bit differently. If we don't beat Luxembourg, it shouldn't be a disaster. It should be an absolute nightmare. Michael O'Neill had 18 games in charge of Northern Ireland. He only won one of them in the first 18. And he was the best thing to happen to Northern Ireland since the 80s.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything you said there. It'll be interesting to see how the mood music and what some of the columnists have to say about this and how that evolves over the coming days. I want to ask you, just before we go here, about your virtual insanity tips for the week.
Well, I'm feeling confident because this is the first tournament now where I've had a second look. The Corrales Championship was played last September. Forget about this match play thing because it's a minefield for weird results. Bryson DeChambeau getting beaten yesterday. Justin Thomas lost. Rory got dusted 6-5 by Ian Poulter. Stay away from that. Thomas Pieters is the headline tip this week. Thomas Pieters at 18-1 for 4 each way. He's the class act in this field. The Corrales Championship at the Dominican Republic starts about 11 a.m. Padraig's in it. Gray McDowell's in it. Seamus Power's in this. But Thomas Pieters, the class act, back in form, 3 top 15 finishes in his last 3 appearances. A big hitter. You need a big hitter around this course. Thomas Pieters for his first PGA Tour win is the headline tip. The others, Patrick Rogers, 2 each way, 35-1. His best finish this year, 11th in this tournament back in September, was 50 in the top 15 at the Genesis Invitational. Former world amateur number 1 Patrick Rogers, 35-1. Justin Suh at 40-1. Another very talented player for 2 each way, was in the Connemara, Victor Hovland, Matthew Wolfe School of 2019, and he was tied 14th in this event last September. Justin Suh. The fourth player, Kelly Craft, 100-1 for 2 each way, has course form at this course, really good course form. 14th last time, 5th and 3rd in previous years. He loves it in the Dominican Republic, even though he hasn't been playing well. I think he can't be overlooked in the hundreds. And Rafael Campos, we had him each way a few weeks ago. He nearly won the Puerto Rico Open. He likes these kind of resort courses, and he was 3rd in this on the satellite event in 2017 at the Punta Cana Resort. So Campos, Craft, Rogers, Suh. But the headline tip, Belgian Thomas Pieters to win this week. The tips and the explanation on otbsports.com and on the app.
3rd in the 2017 satellite event. That's why we come for virtual insanity to one place and one place only, and that's John Duggan. Good stuff.
Cheers.
More John across today on otbsports.com and on the OTB Sports app. It is 8:53 this morning. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Now, I'm delighted to say Vinny Perth is with us to look at Ireland last night. Vinny, how is Stephen Kenny feeling this morning? You know him better than anybody. What's his takeaway from last night?
I think ultimately he's extremely disappointed. I think he's gutted. I think he'll definitely take some positives, and he'll be looking at what went wrong. How can he fix it? Where's the little bits and pieces that he can fix ahead of a game on Saturday? Which is, look, rightly or wrongly, it's probably crucial for him, and I think he'll know that. And he has to fix a couple of small issues around the team, but. I think I haven't heard a lot of commentary. I got the back end of Gary earlier on. I think by and large it's been so far I think it's been balanced, which hasn't always been the case around this Irish team. I think that it's been balanced. There's been pros and cons to the performance, and he will see it that way himself. I've heard him discuss the penalty issue, and he's been annoyed about that. So and I think he was happy enough with a lot of the stuff that went on. So stuff to fix, and he'd be busy about how he fixed that this morning. Yesterday on the show, I was speculating about the possibility of us going 3 at the back on the back of a conversation that we had ages and ages ago, where you were saying that he would absolutely think about 3 at the back because that's the type of manager he is. He didn't play 3 at the back before because we didn't have players. Like when you guys were there, it wasn't necessarily we can only ever have a back 4. It was like, well, we have a back 4 and we have midfielders to play that way. When he was with Ireland, he may well play 3 at the back because he has 2 players who can fit that very well. Were you in any way surprised by the team, the way the formation lined up last night? No, I watched a little bit on this FEI social media channel. I must let them know. It gave it a little bit away for me. I knew Matt Doherty was going to play ahead of Seamus Coleman, and a little bit of shape they were doing. And I think they were well coached last night in that shape when the opposition had the ball. it was very difficult for Serbia to make good passes into Tadic, and that's what he worked on. It looked like little bits of that I would have picked up on a small video the FAI put out. But I'm not throwing the social media manager and the FAI under the bus there. But so it wasn't a shock. And the other thing we would have spoke about was the role of the number 10. So if you look at the two games that really matter, Slovakia and last night, the other stuff in between, the Nations League, look, rightly or wrongly, it doesn't count in my eyes because of everything. But the opposition had Hamash was for Slovakia. We remember him outstanding, everything through him. Last night, Tadic was brilliant. And we have at the moment Alan Brown, who I felt was important to the team. If you remember, I think he's someone who can develop into a real player for Ireland. Maybe there's somebody else there that will come through over the next sort of 16, 18 months. But I think he was important. Now, ironically, I think the first 15 minutes of the game, he was really poor, and that's been missed because overall his performance was really good last night. But so much what goes through that type of player. And we're not developing these Tadics or Hamash that the other nations are. And until we do, we're going to struggle at the high end to break teams down. But I think the shape of the team suited the players. I think it was, yes, there would have been a lot of video sessions, a lot of coaching going on, but a lot of our players play that type of system in their club, so it wasn't a shock to them. And therefore, even Preston do it, so it suited Malumbi and Brown. They would, even if Brown was playing slightly different positions, sometimes at Preston he plays wing back, believe it or not, he would know from being on the training ground with his managers that, you know, you need to go here, there and everywhere. So I think it suited the players, and I think it proved that we've got a good manager who can tactically make changes. People felt, you know, we've listened to the crap about can he do it at this level, etc., etc. He only knows one way. Well, I think he's debunked that part of it, to be fair.
Could you talk us through a little bit more the role of Alan Brown then last night? Because is there a suggestion that maybe he isn't even the type of player that Tadic or Hamšík is, that he's even a little bit different despite playing maybe the same role on the team sheet?
Yeah, he is different, and I think we've seen someone like Jeff Hendrick do that role for Ireland, because it's the modern day number 10. You can have your sort of really skillful guy that you just play through and he doesn't do lots of work, but the modern day number 10 has to run. When you get all these GPS reports, you'll find that someone like Alan Brown has covered a huge distance for Ireland yesterday, probably the biggest distance. It'd be interesting to see it. I'd say he's probably run more than anyone else on the pitch. So, but at the same time, you've got to be creative and you've got to arrive in the box. And he has that. I'm not comparing him to Frank Lampard, but he has that knack of arriving in the box. We see it with Preston. And again, I don't think Irish fans watch enough of the Championship where so many of our players are being based, but he has that knack of arriving in the box. The header he scored last night was brilliant, but the best part of it was his link-up play. He got it off Doherty, went out the other side and arrives in the box at the right moment. That's very difficult to defend against. And people say we need a goal scorer. We do. It would be great to have a young Robbie Keane, but we need to create the chances for us for Robbie Keane's and Alan Brown to score. So it's more than that. And I think Brown's role in it is crucial going forward. And yes, it would be amazing that if there was a young Tadic type player on the way through. I just don't see it yet, but we will see. But he is crucial to the team, I feel, for the next sort of 18 months.
I think the very first game that Stephen Kenny managed, one of the themes from that Bulgaria game was about the lack of a holding midfielder, a stopper in front of the back four or the back three, whatever it may be. Is your sense that actually they can get away with having really good ball players like Malumbi and Cullen there, that they can actually offer enough, even in defensively, that you don't need somebody who specialises as the role of a stopper?
Yeah, listen, again, it would be great if we had a world-class Fabinho or something like that. We don't. So I think he learned from that game. They were too open in midfield. Every time the ball turned over, it looked like I'm going to concede. And he fixed it. So, like I keep saying, he's not fixed to one system. So he fixed that. And he put two number 6s in. or two defensive midfielders, or whatever people want to use the language. I don't want to be too coachy on it, but the two in midfield it gives you a better platform, obviously, and then that does make that role of Alan Brown much more important. So I think we have the players to play with two in midfield, and I think ultimately Cullen is the passer, and Molumby can run all day long and has got good legs in him, and I think ultimately that's a good balance going forward. The challenge for those two young players is it's going okay. It's gone quite well for Cullen. Molumby has to get into the team at Preston, so he's still a bit of a job to do. He's regular enough, to be fair, and a young player. We've got to be patient with him. But because some of our big players have dropped off, like Jeff Hendrick would have been a shoe-in. We lost Conor Hurahan, who's been excellent for Swansea of late. So Robbie Brady has dipped over the last couple of years. So it is time for these young players to be given the chance. The challenge for Ireland is they've got to get into the club team, unfortunately. And we've seen that with Callum Robinson last night. I felt he worked really hard for Ireland, all that. He just lacked that killer instinct, that good pass that was once he broke really brilliantly. And it was Alan Brown on an overlap on the right wing. And he just misplaced his pass. And it's them little moments that come with playing regularly. And he lacked that a little bit, I felt, last night. So we've got to get our players playing regularly, and that's the challenge.
The formation is interesting in the context of Matt Doherty, maybe, and he didn't have his best night last night. He isn't having his best season. Is this something you just naturally have to persist with, because chances are, all things being equal, next year Matt Doherty and Seamus Coleman might be Ireland's best players, assuming he comes back to his level and Coleman stays at his level, this is it now, that this has to be the system that allows them both to be in the team?
Yeah, I suppose the answer to that, honestly, is yes and no. Like, I don't think we need to be married to one system. The problem with 3-5-2 or 3 at the back is that, and I would have seen it, just to give you an example, with Dundalk, we were brilliant in the fullback areas, Dane Massey, Sean Gannon. So if the team came up against us, play 5-3-2 or anything like that, it was great for us because our fullbacks would overlap and we get 2v1s in the wide areas. So if Ireland comes up against a really top team who are going to have their fullbacks as, playing really high up and overlapping, then we're vulnerable in the wide area. So he may not do that. So we can't be wedded to one system. And I don't think our players are that good that we can stick to that system. We need to adapt to the opposition at times, not always. We have to play to our strengths. So I think that's the key. And I think that's also the key why we've got to trust the manager now. We've got to let him have his head and develop this team, because look at the age profile of that team last night. It's Travers in goal, O'Shea, Molumby, Cullen, Condy. Like, you add into that Adam Ida, you add into Jason Knight playing at Derby. There's a lot of good young players you need to come through on their club form, but they're nearly there. And the last thing we need to do is put too much pressure on this international team and sort of let them develop.
That, I guess, chameleon-like ability to go from system to system sounds pretty important then. That idea that you shouldn't be married to one system, that it seemed that they had their work done last night. They knew exactly what system they wanted to play, and it might have been new, but it seemed that they were pretty familiar with it, that maybe we all overrate how long it actually takes for international players to actually get up to speed in a system. It seems actually Stephen Kenny was able to execute his ideas, and his players were able to execute his ideas quite well in a short period of time. Yeah,
I suppose for an hour last night, that was as good as a away performance we've seen in a long, long time. Maybe back as far as, I don't know, maybe France or whatever, but it was a really good away performance. I've heard the point that it wasn't an away performance in the sense of there was no crowd there, etc., and I get that. To be fair, it was neutralised in that sense. But yeah, the system, being able to change the system. Like, remember, we may have, and we've seen it with Callum Robbins, for argument's sake, we've got players who aren't guaranteed to be coming in sharpest at the sharpest. We've got players coming in who aren't regularly playing for the club. So we've got to adapt to different players at our exposure. We may have someone who springs through. I mean, the idea of playing one up front, it's why I have, in one sense, a problem with the way we're developing young players in Ireland is if if Ireland under 16 had two outstanding centre forwards who one played for Man City and one played for Manchester United and were the best 16-year-olds in the world, the underage setup probably wouldn't play with two up front. He'd only play with one, and he'd play a 4-3-3 system. So we need to be careful about systems, and you get your best players on the pitch that are available to you, and you make the most out of them. And I think that's ultimately what Stephen, as a manager, did last night, and he deserves huge credit for last night's performance. But there is areas where he'd be disappointed, and I think there's a couple of areas where I think Ireland could have done better.
Like you mentioned there a couple of times, Vinny, just in terms of the development of young players. So you say there that there's formations maybe that are being used at international level at underage that perhaps aren't allowing players in attacking positions and creative positions to actually thrive. Is that the case that you've seen on a first-hand level?
Yeah, and I'd be like, I don't want to be critical of certain underage managers or anything. I think, like, Rude Doctor, for argument's sake, is someone who's quite divisive in Irish football. I would have challenges with certain things Rude would do, but we've gone down a path and it's starting to produce players. The underage setup is starting to work. But for example, there's no point in playing if underage we have Troy Parrott and we play him on a right wing when his best position is centre forward. Yeah, we have to make the odd adaptation against the team we're playing. But I think there needs to be flexibility. If you've got, as I said, two of the best centre forwards in the country, play them, because we need forwards to come through. Don't be married to one shape. And I think we need to allow that underage manager to say, I'm going to play 4-4-2 because I've got brilliant centre forwards, for argument's sake. And they will tell you they can do that, but when you watch all the underage games, it's generally 4-3-3 and they play out from the back, etc., and it's the one way. So I think it's a bigger discussion. But Irish football need to develop young players. The English clubs aren't going to do it for us anymore. To a point. Ironically, Brexit might help us because the amount of Spanish and Italian and French and African players turning up in England may not be underage, may not be as big. So we need to take a longer view of Irish football. I think last night and what's gone on in the last week is a real eye-opener for people to go, actually, let's take a long-term view of it. I brought it up on the preview during the week to say, it is time we took a long-term view of Irish football. There isn't a quick fix. The top-class players aren't coming through anymore as regularly as they were, and therefore people need to look at this as a long-term, like a development, as they call it, development of a team. We don't have loads of money. I spoke to the Dutch FA about this, and they said that when they had challenges with mixing players from different races, etc., what did they do? One of the solutions was they built a new training ground and the hotel in the training ground, shared landings, shared eating areas, all of that stuff. We don't have the money to just go and spend 40, 50 million in new training grounds. We've got to do things cleverly and trust the right people. And we need to not stop looking at England, because England under 21s would beat Ireland's first team and they'd probably qualify for a major tournament. Stop looking at England and take a long-term view of it. And I think that includes the manager as well. I really do. And I understand he's got to win games. No one will know better than him. But I think that includes the manager at the top of that tree. And take a long-term view of it. I'm not saying we write off the World Cup, but it looks highly unlikely we get there with the current bunch of players we have. And we may have a good European Championships following that, and then maybe be at a World Cup in 4 years' time. That's because we end up looking at teams like Iceland going, how did Iceland get there? How did they get to... And we do a big investigation into how can Croatia develop players? There's only 4 million people there. And we just keep looking at short-term, change the manager, spend another 2 million on some fancy manager all the time, and we don't take long-term decisions. And I think, to be fair to the FAI and Rude Doctor, that's what they've done underage, and now we've got to do that a little bit in the senior team.
So Doctor essentially divorced himself from that idea that underage teams need to play 4-3-3 all the time. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, I think they need to. I think they need to be adaptable. They will say they are. I don't see it realistically, but that's a small point. But the point I'm making, get players through. Ultimately, relying on English clubs as it currently stands to get players into, and the only one that's sort of went away from that a little bit would be Josh Cullen. Jack Bourne has taken a brave decision, could have went to the League One Championship in England. We need to get away from relying on English club developing our players.
And we need forward-thinking people. We need to make harsh decisions. As I said, I back Real Doctor and what he's done because he's upset a lot of people, but he's created elitism around underage football, and that's what we've got to do to make things better.
Look, that is a much broader conversation, Vinny, but it's really interesting because it kind of it reminds us that the stuff that we saw on the pitch last night is actually part of a massive architecture, and sometimes we get divorced from that, and the debate comes down to, should we play 3 at the back or 4 at the back? And ultimately the real conversations need to be had about what the future of football is and our investment and the coaching pathways and the participation numbers and all that kind of stuff. You did mention, though, that just to go back to last night's game, because I don't want to lose too much focus on it, that there were a few things that Stephen would have been pissed off with. Is one of them the little pockets of space that Dusan Tadic got? Is there something that, next time out we need to learn a little bit more about closing down that space and just getting back when something Gary Breen mentioned, it's like, there's just not a laziness, but like a championship level getting back into space as opposed to an international level closing down that space?
Yeah, I think it starts up front. I think, I'm not sure it was the right decision to play Connolly and Robinson. Both of them fitness levels weren't, or sharpness weren't exactly where it needed to be. As much as both of them done okay, I thought Robinson was better than Connolly, but I just think one of them, I think the two of them was too much of a risk. We needed somebody with a little bit fitter and sharper and being able to pick out those passes. When areas of improvement, you look at Dara O'Shea's performance, it was brilliant at times, and he got done for the goal. I felt he could have made a better angle of cover, so we'll work with Dara on that stuff. There was times where Malumbi and Cullen were just not set in that right position, but that comes in time. And you look at Dara O'Shea starting out his career, and this is why it's a bigger argument, is that I seen it. I was at all of the games. I was even, I've seen so many of these games. Richard Dunn wasn't the best, most complete footballer in his first 20 internationals. That came over time. Didn't even get into the team at the start. Now we had huge talented like Stan and Gary and Kenny Cunningham. It took his time. But Dara's gone in, and I thought he was very good last night, but he made a couple of errors at the highest level. And that's what happens. And the problem is we don't have 5 top-class centre-halves anymore. And we're going to have to spend a little bit of time, and Stephen has that on Dara O'Shea, and expect the odd error like last night. I mean, if he defends that first chance a little bit better, we're probably going to have to 1-0 up, and it changes the game. So that's the finer detail that he will have to work on with the team. But in terms of, we may have more of the ball against Luxembourg. Does he change the shape back to a 4-3-3 and go all out attack? Does he play Josh Cullen up front and have real pace at either side of him? We don't know. He'll make that decision on the next day or two. So there's a real foundation there after last night, I feel, and the Slovakia game. The 2 games that matter, there's a real foundation. And I think he has proved, whether it's been the 2 defensive midfielders, whether it's been the 3 at the back, I think he's proved that he's able to learn and adapt to different situations, and he'll take a lot from last night, and a lot of areas of improvement, and he'll have to work on them.
Is there a new personnel you want to see in the starting team on Saturday?
I think I'd like to see Cullen up front, definitely. I think we don't know how people have come out of it. There was this, as I said, Alan Brown covered a huge distance. Can he go again in that number 10 position? I'd like to see us go. Does he leave Matt Doherty out and play as just one right full with Callum Robinson as one of the forward men after getting that hour or 80 odd minutes under his belt? Does he play a 4-3-3?
Sorry, do you mean Collins to you up front rather than Cullen?
Sorry, Collins. Yeah, Collins up front. Sorry, yeah. And does he freshen up with a Robbie Brady? People like that feel like they've something to prove, or does he? So for me, it's Collins up front, definitely, and it's whatever he plays off that is fine. But I think he has to start Collins up front, and a real focal point at a centre forward. I don't think Connolly went off after 65 minutes with cramp, effectively. I mean, that's not good at this level. I understand why he's been injured, and I'm not being harsh on him, but how can he go again in 4 or 5 days at that level? So you'd imagine we have to make that change up front. That's the key one for me. And then, do we change the shape back to a 4-3-3? I think Luxembourg are a decent side. They're on the improve, but it's a game we should win. So how do you score goals? You get your full-backs forward, you get crosses into box, etc., etc. You get runners into the box. And I think he may look at changing that. He may not, but I would certainly think he'd be considering going back to a 4-3-3 for this weekend.
Vinny, last point for me is the kind of overall sense of promise and the desire to win games. There's a balancing act. Obviously, he started by saying this. Like it or not, this game essentially at the weekend, it quickly becomes must win for the mood music. It's obviously not must win in terms of the future of Irish football, but actually, the team needs to win to get confidence, and the confidence that will give the team will improve the players, and it will improve the bond that they have together. It's a sweet elixir in sport.
Yeah, listen, I think I don't know whether we're split as a country on this one in 50-50. I think it's more maybe 70-30. I don't know. In terms of backing this sort of Kenny project or basically the other crew who don't think he's good enough, etc., etc. I think I'm not sure what the right answer is. I think he's got to ultimately win games, okay? But I think we've got to back this manager. I think we've got to back him as a long-term. People will say, well, Vinny would say that he's talking about his mate. Well, no, that's not true. Because if anyone has a gripe with Stephen Kenny in Irish football, it's me, right? So, we've had a long time together. So I'm not backing him for the sake of it. I think we've got to back him. We've got to put someone in long term. We've got to make a long-term decision and run this national team like a club and just shut out the noise. I think the Coleman piece you done yesterday there was just sensational, believe it or not. I think it answered so much and it shut people up. And Tosh Seamus was brilliant on it. It was nonsense. I think some of the journalists have been so out of touch of what's happening in Irish football, and they've been let down by whoever's leaking the information from internally in the FAI. And I think it's time we back the manager, take a long-term view of it, accept it might be difficult for the World Cup campaign. And I'm not suggesting we write it off and give him a free pass. There has to be improvement throughout this campaign. We have to see constant improvement up until the last game. And I think we'll get the rewards of it in the European Championship and the World Cup to follow. And I think it's time we just stop the noise, stop the rubbish talk. If he makes a mistake, call him out on it. Absolutely. He's big and ugly enough to deserve that. But don't make stuff up. Don't make it up. Back the manager and just stop the nonsense. And I think Irish football is what's happening underage is paying off in our first team. What he done in the 21s for that 18 months is starting to pay off in the first team. Yes, he needs to win games starting this weekend. I accept that. But just back the man, for God's sake, and get on with it. We can't compete with Croatia. We can't compare. There's someone going to spring out of European Championships and social media is going to be going, how can they do this and Ireland can't? How can Iceland do it 4 years ago, Ireland can't? Because they took a long-term view of it and a long-term plan. And we don't have the money to throw at it that Germany, Holland do to rebuild nations and international sides. So long-term view, back the manager, give him all the support he needs and stop the rubbish talk. It's the only way we fix Irish football as a whole.
Vinny, always great to talk to you. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, lads.
It's Vinny Perth there. Always very thoughtful, particularly in the build-up of the Ireland games and the aftermath of them as well. Brilliant analysis there. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Here's what we've got coming up for you on OTB Sports Radio. Just say, Alexa, play OTB Sports Radio. And it's a non-stop Ireland's first sports radio station on your smart speaker. OTB Gold at 1 o'clock, Cora Staunton, The History of Sports. That's the lecture series from Paul Rouse, which will make you feel much smarter when you finish listening to that. Our retro panel is the importance of Club GAA. And then OTB Gold tonight, Brian O'Driscoll meeting Eason Asewa, two Leinster legends. Good week for that, because obviously Leinster and Munster is back. It's back, baby. And it's on Saturday afternoon. We'll talk a good bit more about that on tomorrow's show. And then tonight, analysis and reaction to last night's game and, of course, panel on living with cancer. That's coming up from 8 o'clock tonight. We've got rugby with Niamh Briggs coming up at 9:30, but Sue Murphy joins us next for the OTB TV Picks.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Saturday panel on OTB.
The thing that came out of that situation, something that I would like any young boy or girl that suffers from racism in the future thinks about, is that I will never be the victim of racism again, because I'm not the one with the problem. And for a lot of my growing years, I didn't see that. I thought I had the problem.
Don't miss the panel every Saturday afternoon on OTB Sports Radio. Tune in 24/7 on the OTB Sports app. OTB Sports Radio. This week, in association with the Irish Cancer Society and supported by Novartis Ireland, we'll have a special takeover of our shows, including Thursdays Off the Ball from 7 p.m, when we'll have our Living Well and Beyond with Cancer panel of Mary Cullen and Noel McCaffrey. It's that time of the year when the Irish Cancer Society are raising badly needed funds. You can find out more and how to donate at cancer.ie. Tune in 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Right, very good morning to you. If you've just joined us, you've missed quite the show. We've been parsing Ireland's 3-2 defeat last night in Belgrade against Serbia. We'd love to hear from you, 0879 180 180, and obviously we'll be talking about it all day on all of our social channels. You can get over to our Twitter feed at Off the Ball AM, or of course you can watch back to YouTube, which is still streaming, of course, youtube.com/Off the Ball, and leave a comment there. Big debates happening about backing the manager long term. Vinny Perth making a very impassioned case for it there. To be honest, I kind of agree with that at this stage. It's like, let's keep doing the same thing we've always done and repeat the patterns. That's the definition of insanity, or try something new. I think we're all ready for something new. Anyway, every week around at this time, Sue Murphy joins us to talk to us about what you should be watching, what you might have missed, and some recommendations. So Sue, it's football this week, I think, is it?
Yeah, the Finding Jack Charlton doc is on Virgin Media, and I think it's actually repeated on BBC Two the following Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. I actually got a hold of this week and watched it, and it is really, it's not an easy watch. It's very, very hard. Like, it's really heartbreaking. So there's a lot of stuff in it that's like the old 88 and 90 and all the great stuff that people just never ever get sick of watching, and that's brilliant, and some behind the scenes stuff and Jack starting to sing songs and all. But it's kind of woven with him in the last couple of years of his life suffering from dementia, and they're basically showing him clips on the computer of like, do you remember this, Jack? And do you remember when this happened? And he's like, no, I don't remember this. And it's just, we grew up with Jack Charlton, and he was such a, like, beyond household name. He was like a god in our house. And there was such a spark about him, and it's gone a little bit in the last couple of years of his life, and he just keeps repeating himself a little bit. And I found it a very, very difficult watch, because you just have such an attachment to him as a person. He's this great honorary Irishman. And then there's kind of the Paul McGrath story is woven in there as well, and Paul is really, really honest about like everything that happened to him and his involvement with Jack and how Jack had encouraged him. And it's, do you know, there's a lot of like great moments where you're like, oh yeah, I remember Italian 90 and how amazing it was. And then it's kind of, God, like Paul is suffering, Jack is suffering now, and it's actually a really good documentary. Like, I totally recommend watching it, even if you're not into football. It's just a very, very good documentary.
It's called Finding Jack Charlton. It's on Virgin Media on Sunday. That's on BBC next week. I think it's on Apple as well. It certainly was for a period of time there.
Yeah, because it got a release early, yeah, but it's just launched on TV this week, yeah.
Okay. And there's a donate for dementia.ie, and there's a Jumping Jacks craze that people are filming, and that's all in association with Virgin Media this week as well. The hashtag is donate for dementia. Flight attendant on Sky, we want to talk about this. This is the new and shiny stuff this week. What is flight attendant?
I really enjoying this, and I can't really tell, like, I feel like I say this shit up, but I can't really tell if it's brilliant or not, but it's really addictive. So it's Kelly Kuko, who's in The Big Bang Theory. This is kind of her first big role, and she really fought for this role, because they were like, you know, when you do a big series like The Big Bang Theory, you're just not going to be able to get away from that character. But she plays a flight attendant who just has this chaotic life. She's an alcoholic. She's just got this, like, it's kind of flashes of her relationship with her father. It wasn't that great. And then she goes on a date when she's on a trip, wakes up the next morning, and the guy is dead in the bed beside her, and she cannot remember anything from the night before. She cleans up the room and then just leaves and gets on a flight back and is completely panicked all the way through. Anytime anyone says anything to her or questions where she was the night before, she's just completely a wreck. And decides that it's a really good idea to try and find out who actually did kill him instead of actually just trying to cover her own tracks. So she's just this walking disaster. And that's what, like, kind of what makes it so entertaining, because she's really, really funny. But I think people, like, it's a bit jarring in parts because it kind of sometimes doesn't know what it is itself. But it just, you get to the end of the episode and you're like, I'm going to have to find out, like, who did kill him and, like, what did happen. And it's all told in flashback then through her night. But she's very good. She's actually very good in it, and I'm really enjoying it. I think people who watch it will just be binging all the way through it.
Is it going to be one season? Is that the plan? Oh no, there's a second season.
There's a second season, yeah, and there's 8 episodes in the first. So I was afraid to look because I'm only on episode 3, and I was afraid to look to see how they're going to set up season 2. But I think she's actually quite good, and she's a good comedy actress. And I don't think people give enough credit to comedy actors. It's actually a very difficult thing to make people laugh, and they're usually passed over. But she's very good in this.
You've got that right smile on there. What's that going on?
Like I'm looking forward to seeing this. I've heard very mixed reviews of this. Is the thing.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised. Usually when I see a mixed review coming out, I usually predict that Sue is going to fall down on the side of going a little harsher than most people on it. So I'm pleasantly surprised by this. So we can cut through the noise and tell you to watch this week.
Yeah, like, I think watch it. It's addictive and it's a binge watch. But I don't think it's going to fit in Ger's, like, this has to be brilliant or I'm not going to watch it. So I don't think Ger's going to watch it. But I think if you're just looking for something...
That sounds like the type of cast that I'm interested in. But ultimately, there's only a limited amount of TV shows you're going to be able to watch before you die. So, don't be wasting time on crap. There's a lot of good stuff out there. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. What the hell is this?
Oh, yeah. This is kind of maybe my fall into the bracket of don't waste your time. I seem to be very much in the minority on this because the reviews of this have been brilliant. But it takes place after Avengers Endgame, and I feel like I was talking about this during the week, and I just feel like they picked the 2 characters that nobody will have any sort of personal connection with in the Avengers, and they tried to make a series out of them. And it's just kind of like the Falcon was obviously handed Captain America's shield at the end of the Avengers, and it's basically you go on and you're going to defend America, and it's kind of this. Anthony Mackie plays Sam Wilson, who's the Falcon. He's just kind of like, oh, will I be able to take up this mantle? And that's basically the first episode, is him just wrestling with the fact if he could be a superhero. There's a couple of, like, really huge fight sequences, and then there's kind of flashbacks of who the Winter Soldier was before, and, like, all of the things he's trying to make amends for in his life. And it just feels very samey. And for me, it's disappointing because WandaVision was so good. And they actually did something that was a bit of a departure and something completely different. And then you have this and you're like, oh, you're just taking a step back and we're back to the start. Now, I will say I'm in the minority in this, and people are really, really liking it, and the reviews have been good. But I just felt like it was so much setup in the first episode. I just was like, please just get to the point.
You just hate superhero things anyway, don't you?
I don't hate them. I used to be a massive superhero fan, and then, like, I was reviewing at the time when all those Avengers films came out, and you're 25, 30 films, you're just like, I cannot watch another superhero film. Like, it's just very hard to do. That sounds like a real first world problem, doesn't it?
But it's almost like perfect for a television format, isn't it? Like, it's a relatively new thing that we're starting to see, like The Mandalorian and WandaVision and this, like, now on in a small screen version, whereas you would have thought that anything to do with Star Wars or Marvel just has to be big screen all the time. Whereas this makes more sense. As you say, 30 films is stupidly long. Could that have been a little better if this is actually a long, drawn-out 10-part series or 10-series television show, for example? I accept that commercially it makes no sense, but quality-wise, it does.
Yeah, and probably, like, COVID has probably led it to be a series as well, a TV series. But I definitely think, like, even though it is the 2 characters that you probably won't have the greatest connection with, they could make them into something that you would have a connection with, and they've done that with Wanda. So it's possible it could get better, and it's just taken a while to get everyone back in. You're like, oh, do you remember Avengers Endgame? Let's get everyone back into that frame. So that's why I was finding it difficult, because it's just like, I remember Avengers Endgame, and I think a lot of people who are big Marvel fans will remember a lot of this film, so it just feels like the first episode is really slow. But I don't know, I'm kind of a bit skeptical. Sorry.
Two other quick things we want to talk about: Molly's Game on Netflix and National Treasure on 4 on Demand.
Yeah, if you haven't, I am obsessed with National Treasure. If you haven't seen it, it is like, I think I'm like, I should basically be getting a cut from Channel 4 at this stage. The amount of times I've talked about it. It's on all 4. It's only 4 episodes. It's probably called Train plays a comedian who's accused of sexual assault, and it's a historic accusation, and he denies it all the way through the series, and he's trying to protect his family. Julie Walters plays his wife, Andrea Riseborough, in amazing performance as his daughter, and she's very, very troubled, and he's trying to protect her from everything that's happening. But all the way through it, you're like, did you do it? Did you do it? Oh, maybe you didn't. Oh, maybe you did. Oh, maybe you didn't. And his performance is absolutely incredible in the 4 episodes, and he will keep you guessing all the way through. But it came out around the same time as the Savile stuff. Like, it's been around for a few years, and I think maybe 3 years. But if you missed it,
yeah.
Oh yeah, maybe I didn't realize it was that old. Yeah, but it's absolutely brilliant. Like, the performances in this are so good. Yeah.
Any connection to the Nicolas Cage film?
No, that would be interesting though. That crossover would be interesting.
Apparently, there's a series of those films. There's more coming back. So that's Robbie Coltrane in. It's on 4OD, and it's called National Treasure. Molly's Game. Did you mention that?
Yeah, I feel like Molly's Game, when it came out in 2017, and for some reason it got a bit of a bad rap. Now, the reviews for like since have been good, and I think like anywhere you look at it, I think it's 82% in Rotten Tomatoes with critics. But I don't know, the talk around it was that it was a bit empty, and it was a brilliant performance by Jessica Chastain. But I actually think the story is incredible, and she is obviously brilliant in it. But it's a great one to go back and rewatch, and you're just watching her, and she's always on the edge of danger, and you're like, how are you living your life like this? Like, she's been chased by the mafia. If you don't know the story, it's Molly Bloom, based on true story, Molly Bloom, who set up these high stake poker games, and you're kind of trying to guess who the people are involved. At one point you're like, who's that actor? And there's rumors about who that actor is, but she's just great in it. And I just think it's a good, if you have a couple of hours, it's definitely worth a watch. It's Sorkin's first director, Turner's director, and he's written it as well, and I just think Sorkin's genius. But I really enjoyed it.
Okay. And then everybody's talking about, banging on about Line of Duty at the moment. Is Line of Duty any good?
Have I talked to you about my obsession with Line of Duty and Adrian Dunbar? I just finished the first episode, and I don't want to give anything away, but like, I just love it. Now, like, Kelly MacDonald, I don't think Kelly MacDonald is the greatest actress in the world, but that's why she's perfect as a police woman, because it's just like, read these lines and say you're doing these right, and but they're investigating her, and it's I like that they just haven't gone down the route of who's the person that's behind this. They're still dealing with the every series they deal with some kind of conspiracy. So it's just great. It's really great. Like, TV, it doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes. You're like, that doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't matter because it's just great.
That sounds like the type of thing that would annoy me. Is it actually good, Sue, or is it? Go on.
Yeah.
Tell me. Is it good?
It is. Yeah, it's really good. Like, it's just something, like, some of the conversations that they have, you're just like, no one would have that conversation in real life. You know what I mean? It can be a bit like the script could be a bit stunted, and sometimes you could see like, oh God, that's a real plot hole. Like, there's no way that would happen, or how did that person get back there?
Selling hard there, so keep selling it.
But that's if you're forensically watching it. But like, it's really like, it's full attention. There's great car chases, all that kind of stuff, and it just makes the police look way cooler sometimes than they are.
Okay, nice. Pro police propaganda. With plot holes and bad acting. Hooray!
That sounds really bad. It's not. It's very, very good. You will enjoy it. Like, it's good police drama.
We'll talk about season 5 of The Wire next week, I think, if everybody can get there in time. Sue, good stuff. Thanks very much. That's this week's OTB TV Picks from Sue. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Give me the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We're going to hear from Ronan O'Gara, Alan Quinlan, Kevin Kilban. There's the crappy quiz and much more on tomorrow's show. Right now, we're bringing you rugby, the fallout from the Six Nations weekend, and the Leinster-Munster rivalry with Niamh Briggs.
look, you know as well as I do, it's a results-driven business, and you'd have thought at the back of your head that probably Eddie had enough credit in the bank, being Six Nations champions, World Cup finalists. But for me, the anomaly of this tournament was that French performance, because for the other performances and the other games, they were really, really off the mark. And, I spoke earlier on about that emotive, probably buy-in. I didn't really see that at any stage from the English players. I thought, the player selection will definitely have to come into it. There, when you look at, like, I rugby nut, so I watch all the Premiership games every weekend, and you see the players that aren't selected to play for England, and you're thinking England must be unbelievable. And then they turn up and they're not. They couldn't be further from that. And so yeah, it's a funny thing. They had obviously a big disruption at the start with the COVID thing and not being able to, their coaches not being available to train for the first couple of weeks, and then the lack of game time for those Saracens players, because they're his drivers. They're the ones that are him on the pitch. They're, that core group of Saracens players are basically his mini-me's, and they're the ones that have always bought into what he was trying to do. I think I feel really sorry for some of his players, the likes of Ollie Lawrence, who gets his first cap, touches the ball once, gets the second cap and touches the ball twice. Anthony Watson didn't touch the ball till the 70-something minute. I think that's wherein is their issues. They're coming a bit like Ireland, I think, in that 2019, where they got to a pitch and were doing really, really well, and then don't evolve with the game the way the game has evolved, if that makes any sense. And their discipline has been appalling. And, that's got to be a player and a coach responsibility, I think. And as I was talking to JP earlier on about it, and for me, Mario Toge giving those 5 or 6 penalties away, he obviously got spoken to the following Monday review or whatever. He wasn't the same player for the last few games, because he was almost like, oh my God, I wonder, was it a case of, well, if you give away more penalties, you're going to be dropped. And then it takes away his edge. He was non-existent for the last 2 games for the most part. So there's a lot of issues in that England squad. I think when you look at the likes of Marcus Smith, Sam Simmons, Joe Simmons, and like Ollie Lawrence was playing brilliant rugby for Bath, and then gets selected to play for England, and they don't even use him the way he should be used. And it's always, I was only chatting to one of the lads at the weekend. I feel with England and Eddie Jones, he brings in these new players, and if things aren't going right, not necessarily to do with that new player, they're the first ones hauled off all the time or not selected. He always goes back to that tried and tested, the Elliot Daly's, the Owen Farrells, George Fords. Like, there has to come a time where if they're not in form, then they get dropped. What then does that do for the rest of the squad? Oh, like, we thought he was undroppable, he's not. So then that puts fire up everybody else and makes them play better, if that makes any sense. There's almost a case of, well, we know all the Saracens boys, or we know the first 10 that's going to be on the team sheet type of thing, because it's the way he's always played.
Yeah, I mean, he generally goes with 6 Saracen starters. I think when Daly was dropped, it was down to 5. But that's a third of the team. And what will be very interesting, you'd love to be a fly in the wall in this review, which is upcoming, is Eddie just turning around and saying, look, lads, this Saracen thing's a mess. None of them were fit. That's a third of my team. So, look, this is just a bad Six Nations. Let's call it the Saracens' consequence. And it'll be fine come next year. You wonder, will that wash? You wonder, is that the way he's thinking? Because if it's not the way he's thinking then he's looking at a complete rebuild job.
Yeah, I think what's to say that those, our Saracens going to come up for definite. Like, you might think that they are with all this money, but they've been beaten twice already in the championship. So, is it an automatic thing that they come up?
Maybe not.
Also, the fact
maybe they all get out of town if they don't get up. Maybe they're like, look, I'll do 1 year, but I'm not doing 2.
Yeah, well, they'll have to. You could see the likes of McAvoy, Billy Vanapola, Owen Farrell. I thought they were all really, really poor for the majority of that tournament. And it's also a case of they're not playing. What does it do for the for the squad morale is what I've been thinking. They're not playing. They don't play week in, week out. Now they effectively go back to Saracens and play championship rugby. Is that how it works for the next couple of months or whatever? And then you've the likes of these, Henry Slade, Ollie Lawrence, these guys that are playing week in, week out and playing really good rugby with really good teams and with guys that should be there and thereabouts. Like, Sam Simmons has scored the most tries in the Premiership for the last two seasons, I'm pretty sure. And he, a number 8, big guy that can run physically, but also can offload and kind of give them a different dimension. And yet, it's almost a case with Eddie that he's just got stubborn or something, because people are calling for all these players to be brought in and he just doesn't want to know about them. So I think they have a lot of issues, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that review.
Yeah, for sure. And Ellis Genge even saying he couldn't wait to get away from the bloody place. It wasn't that much fun. I wouldn't say Eddie Jones' camp is that much fun. And another thing, and like, you can't shed any light on this, I can't shed any light on this, but it's interesting when you're talking about just the balance in the camp. When you stop and think about it, there will be players in that English camp or on the fringes who look at the Saracens boys and still think, you lads cheated. You've robbed so-and-so out of a medal here. I know they'll come out and they say they had a meeting and they cleared the air when it all happened, but I guarantee you, there's got to be a couple in there saying, yeah, look, I'm going to have a coffee with you and we'll get on and everything, but it can't be great for team spirit either. It might be 10 years before we get the truth about how everybody feels about that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I'm sure a lot of those Exeter boys, especially because they feel like that they've had a lot of players that should be in that squad and aren't in there. The Simmons brothers obviously being case in point, and they're also the ones that lost out for them for a couple of years. But look, it's hard to know. I think
it is.
To be fair to those Saracens boys, they weren't the ones making the decisions at board level, so they were just going out and playing, and so. Like, if you're Owen Farrell or Mario Toge or whoever, like, do you turn around and say, listen, like, no, that's not right? Do you know what I mean? Like, they're playing, like, do you know what I mean? They're players effectively, and whatever happens behind the scenes, it's very difficult to try or to kind of blame a player for that. I think it was just a poorly managed situation by club. As opposed to the players.
Yeah, I think you're right. And ultimately, if we were to get the reasons, I suspect it might be 1% of a reason out of 99 others before it. But it's just it's all part of this Saracens thing, which has affected them. So where does that leave us as we kind of sign off and head towards the sunset then to South Africa, which I think is good. In terms of Irish lines, starters, I'm seeing various teams around the place over the last couple of days. I saw Donald Lennon, Eddie O'Sullivan and Bernard Jackman picked a team in against the Head, and they wangled in 4 Irish players. They had Tyg Byrne in, they had Johnny Sexton in, they had Robbie Henshaw in, and they had Tyg Furlong in. So they had 4 in the starting lineup. So no James Ryan, no Conor Murray. I guess I don't know who else you might stick in. What's your thinking on the lines as things stand?
Like, as a squad or as a starting test?
I'm kind of more interested in starting test. Then I might throw, any squad members, I guess.
I think Tyg Furlong is 100% nailed on.
Yeah.
I think, he's so far ahead of everybody else. And what he's done, I suppose, having been out for a year, is probably even more reason to think that he's nailed on, because he's only going to get better and better as the next couple of months go by with more game time. I think for me, Johnny Sexton is definitely in there too. I think
which, by the way, is kind of amazing, isn't it? I think at the start of the championship, Finn Russell, George Ford, just by dint of age and everything else, were licking their lips saying, well, Sexton's out of the equation here. I mean, he hasn't finished 80 minutes in a long time, certainly not consecutively. And what is he, the 10 of the championship?
Yeah, for me, he is now. I've seen a couple of articles about Dan Biggar, and to be fair, Dan Biggar never really does anything wrong, and he's incredibly astute as a rugby player, very good technical mind. There's just something lacking for me in terms of, like, Johnny's grumpy, he can drive people, he gets the best out of those around him, and that's not to say I don't know Dan Biggar, but from watching, he just seems like, he came off nearly every game for Wales at 50 minutes.
Yeah, that's always a bit odd, isn't it? Callum Sheedy finishes.
And completely sorry for cutting across here. I actually think he's the reason. Taking him off so early in the last game, in the French game, was the reason they lost. I thought they lost all control after he went off. I was really surprised at that. Robbie Henshaw, for me, and I don't think the form that Conor Murray showed last week has catapulted him straight back into that conversation. I thought he was excellent, and I would like to think that the more he'll play now over the next couple of weeks, the sharper he'll get again. And I thought he was really good. The fairy tale in me would love to see Keith Earls in there. But
it's interesting. The boys I mentioned, Donal, Lenihan, Eddie O'Sullivan, Bernard Jackman. I should have given you their team to kind of give you a sense of what they were thinking. In their backline, they had Gareth Davies in instead of Murray. They had Sexton, and they had Owen Farrell and Henshaw together. And then on the wings, they had Liam Williams and Rhys Sammet with Stuart Hogg at fullback.
Yeah, I saw that, and to be fair, it's an unbelievable backline. I am going to be a little bit controversial here. I actually wouldn't have Owen Farrell in there.
Right.
I would start Robbie Henshaw at 12. And I would love to see Keith Earls in there. I think he's playing better rugby than he was 4 years ago, which is outrageous when you think about it. He went on the Lions tour 8 years ago, is it now?
No, 09, it'd be 12.
09?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
This will be the full, that was in South Africa, so this would like be a certain symmetry to it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think he's playing brilliant rugby. Now, that's just the fairy tale in me, and I'm not sure, because there is some unbelievable wingers there. I think Rhys Sammet's, come burst onto the scene, but then you've like George North as well, and Anthony Watson,
Liam Williams,
and these guys. So
the lads had Liam Williams in as well.
Yeah, and Stuart Hogg has got to be nailed down as 15. Like, I think that's going to be a given. So
is Gary? Would you be worried about Gary Ringrose now? Because I think maybe towards the end of last year, a lot of people would have felt, well, such a brilliant defender and reader of the game and touch of class, that he'd have a very good chance of being in there. But the Six Nations hasn't gone his way, so I don't know how he flips that.
Yeah, I think, well, look, it's similar to 4 years ago when Peter O'Mahony hadn't played well or played at all because he'd been injured, and came in for, was it 4 years ago where he came in for the last Six Nations game, and all of a sudden, captain for the first test. I think Ringrose 100% has a chance. I actually think for the first couple of games, he was doing his best to drag us through some really sticky situations. Okay, the last game that he played, Italy, I think it was, didn't go, or not Italy, Scotland, didn't go too well for him. But other than that, he had probably been the form, centre for the previous 12 months. But it's funny, the way the lines work. Usually kind of only, it's not really the year before that they usually take on into account. It seems to be the Six Nations and the run-in. And, traditionally you'd have Six Nations and then you'd have European Cup. And it used to be kind of, I felt like it used to be based off that almost. So it'll be interesting. And, it'll be a bit unfair for him not to be. But I think Henry Sade's played really well.
You forget Gatland. I know this is Niamh Briggs' team as opposed to what we think Gatland will do. But Gatland loves Jonathan Davies. Yeah,
and he's class. But is he playing as well as he has been? Is he carrying injuries? But then he's really good at doing the basics really well. He never makes a mistake. His ability to cover across the line, is similar to Robbie Henshaw's, to be fair to him. So, yeah, Jonathan Davies will probably be in there. And I really, really like Hugh Jones from Scotland. I think he it's a bit left field, I get it, but I think he causes huge problems staying the teams. And I was a bit surprised to see him not starting this weekend, that Chris Harris was back in for France. So, look, I suppose this is like we've just left one tournament and now we're also excited about the Lions and we can just argue about this next few weeks. I just think on the plane or in a whole test squad, I'd love to see 6 or 7 names in there. I think it would definitely be warranted.
Yeah. Well,
like Ian Henderson, it's very difficult to not look at that.
Well, you think, he will certainly go. It's okay because he really emerges as a brilliant player for the midweek team. I think there was a game. He arrived. He was unlucky. He was part of a batch that played kind of jet lagged and when they first arrived in New Zealand and had to fight his way back from memory. And I think Sexton was in the same boat for a while, but then injuries meant he kind of played himself into form. So if that was kind of your back line, you're having Furlong in the front row. The Lenihan, O'Sullivan, Jackman team had Itoje and Alan Wynne in the second row. They did have Tyg Byrne at 6. So is it Itoje and Alan Wynne for you in the second row?
No, I think it could be. You see, I'm not sure Alan Wynne will start. As much as I love him, he's one of my favourite players. Yeah. I just think, for me, his performances not really dipped, but I thought, against France the last day, I thought, he was lucky not to be Simbin. A lot of penalties. Thought there was a lot of his work rate's unbelievable, and if they were going to pick a tour captain and a test captain, I think Alwyn would be the perfect tour captain. I think, his record is unbelievable. I think it could be Itoje and James Ryan in second row, or Itoje, James Ryan. I think Itoje has to start. As much as when we play against him, drives me insane because he's such on the edge. But when I'm supporting him, I love the fact that he's on the edge. And they're going to need somebody like that with a bit of dog in them against South Africa. That's going to be a big thing.
It's amazing. It seems like Tyke Byrne really has gone from not sure would he play for Ireland to now being a line starter in a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah, he's been unbelievable. And, there's a lot, people question his size, I think, a lot. And for me, I think the game is starting to evolve away from these big, heavy second rows to a certain point. I think when you look at the likes of New Zealand and Sam Whitelock and Scott Barrett and these guys, that they're not huge, but what they do is they have finesse about them and their ability to link play, but also their ability to match a line out, which Tyke Byrne has been really good at. And if he plays in the second row, he gives that option of almost having a fourth back row. And I think if you go with a big kind of front row like a Tyke Byrne, probably Mac Vunipola or Sinclair type of a player, they're big enough to kind of take the weight in the scrum. I think now the guards are probably roaring laughing at me talking about a scrum, but I think he's too important. He's way too crafty. His ability to get over the ball, but his ability to put himself into positions. He's really clever. I was watching the other day when I watched the game back at picking his moments. There are the times when you could jump into nearly every rock and come away with nothing, whereas he's happy enough to kind of follow the play behind and just wait for his little opportunity. And the minute he gets it, he doesn't leave it go. And for me, he has to go. I don't think you can deny that kind of good form.
And Johnny Sexton, needless to say, would be the oldest starting 10 on a Lions tour by some distance. God, if ever a conversation warranted being in a pub with pints around the table and crisp packets open everywhere, it's who should start for the Lions.
Absolutely.
So just to round off the chat then, France and Scotland is now not a dead rubber as a result of the French miracle late on Saturday night. They need to beat the Scots by 21 points and score 4 tries in doing so. I mean, if they're going to beat them by 21 points, they're going to score the 4 tries, I think. Scots disappointing, obviously, post Twickenham against Wales and against Ireland. So, they have a lot to play for here, Scotland. And they know there'll be a lot of eyeballs on this game. I mean, initially in the euphoria after France performed the miracle against Wales, you thought, my God, anything's possible. 21-point victory against the Scots, they'll do it. There's destiny about this. The more I think about this game, 21 points is a whopping. I mean, Scotland are not going to lose this game by 21 points, are they?
I can't see it. I really can't. I think, and to be fair to Gregor Townsend, he's gone all in. That's the strongest possible team he could have selected, albeit, Sean Maitland was not released from his club and Johnny Gray's injured. That's it then, So, and they'll definitely, for them, I think this tournament will probably be a little bit disappointing given how they started it. And, if it's going to be so important for them going into their next phase or next evolution that they finish on something of a high. I think France, I can't even begin to describe how they won that match the other day. I actually think Wales lost it as opposed to France winning it.
Okay.
And their discipline was appalling. I think the COVID break has broken French momentum. And I don't think Scotland will be as cynical or as probably silly. There were silly penalties that Wales gave away, silly penalties. I don't think that'll happen for Scotland. So I do think France will win. I just don't think they'll win by 21 points.
Yeah, it's a tall order. Our rugby coverage here on Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish team of us, everyone in. We're talking to Niamh Briggs. Before you go, there is the small matter of Leinster-Munster in a Pro 14 final, 5 o'clock. Kick-off on Saturday, it's on Air Sport. I mean, the interesting thing here is to what extent this match will be prioritised for both sides. Leinster have the bigger squad, I suppose, but for Munster, they have to balance the desperation to win a first trophy in what will be 10 years, effectively. 2011, their last win. I was a Magners League as it was then. Basically, you're asking a lot of players to have played against Scotland and then England, and then a Pro 14 final, and then they have Toulouse a week later, and then they'll have, hopefully from their point of view, a European Cup quarter-final against Wasps or Clermont the week after that. In fact, you're saying 5 weeks. 5 weeks on the bounce for the likes of Stander, for the likes of Keith Earls. I think Kilcoyne's HIA rules him out. For Conor Murray, you're saying 4 weeks on the bounce because obviously he was injured and unused against Scotland. So the word from Van Grant seems to be we're going all out this Saturday. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see the team. So we'll worry about, you know, next week and the week after when they arrive. But there seems to be a sense with Munster in particular, winning a trophy is the priority. Do you think that's the right thing to do, or could they live to really regret this if they're dumped out of Europe because they're all wrecked by week 5?
No, I think they've got to go for it. I think the piece of silverware, the trophy that they're craving, is probably a little bit more important to them in the now than what's coming down the road. I think for Billy Holland and for CJ Sander, I think for them to go out with, you know, something tangible that they've won will be huge for them as a squad. I think the big thing, you know, for Munster now is that over the last few weeks they've been able to give all these young guys you know, loads of game time, which has been brilliant. And so now you can start, you know, a Keith Earls Stander on the bench and unload them if you have to, and therefore you're reducing some of the load. I think, you know, that's down the line. I think for this Saturday, and look, I've been there. You come away off a good Six Nations win like you did against England. You're only buzzing to get back playing.
Sure,
and if you get back playing and it's a final and it's against Leinster, you're walking into Van Grant on Monday morning and you're saying, yeah, I'm good to go. Like I really want to play this game. I think Toulouse is going to be a tall order anyway, because, you know, just because they're playing really well this season and they've so many stars across the pitch, but they also have the part as well where their French players are playing this weekend with France, so they're going to be in a similar boat in terms of the likes of Dupont and Entamac and these guys. They're playing against Scotland Friday, and then the following weekend they're playing Munster, so it's going to be something similar for them too. So I think that's going to be a week by week case. I think it'll be how fresh they feel. I think you know, the likes of Jack O'Donoghue, Craig Casey, Calvin Nash, Shane Daly, Mike Haley, these guys have all been playing really, really well. And so, you know, you have to give them confidence too. So it doesn't, you know, automatically mean that the lads will, you know, they'll probably start this weekend, but you've got to trust them too in big games, those younger guys. And so I think Munster finally got into a position where they now have that little bit of strength and depth, that if the likes of O'Mahony or a Stander isn't starting against Toulouse, well, they're not really losing out in a huge amount, because what's there is pushing them. And as for Leinster, like, look, it's a conveyor belt of absolute unbelievable talent. And it's crazy to think that Johnny comes back to 10 and Ross Byrne and Harry Byrne are playing, and that if Robbie goes back to 12, then, you know, Kieran Frawley, who I absolutely love, and Rory Loughlin, who I think is class, aren't going to be in there either. So they've, you know, an unbelievable embarrassment for riches in terms of, and they've managed it really well in terms of nobody will be undercooked. Do you know what I mean? Like, Leinster have managed their international players being away and getting guys game time really, really well. So it's really exciting. I can't wait. And I just, you know, the old romantic in me would love to see a Munster win just for the two guys. But, you know, Leinster just really strong too, and a home game for them. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Leinster have Toulon in the last 16 match, and then it'll be Exeter or Leon in the quarter-final. So again, look, similar boat. Tyke Furlong, Cian Healy, Johnny Sexton, Robbie Henshaw, Hugo Keenan, all. You'd be asking them to go 5 weeks on the bounce. Out for Leinster, James Ryan's out, Will Connors is out, Gary Ringrose is out with his ankle, Caelan Doris still unavailable, Dan Levy is unavailable as well. So that's where we are. And that's before we introduce, you know, I mean, kind of tantalising to think of Joey Carberry starting. He was rested at the weekend for the Benetton game, and you know, you kind of think back to the 13-10 game at Thomond in January, where they were mainly fully loaded. Like, Munster were really close that day. Leinster scored a sucker try late on. JJ Hanrahan missed 2 kicks. So, like, there's a definite sense Munster are closing in. I'm hearing quite a few people tipped to win this weekend. I know it's kind of hard to do that before you see the teams. But there's definitely a sense this is a really good chance for them. I get the impression you're thinking along those lines too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important for them to go and try and win. I think it's going to be important. I think it's going to be more important for Munster to break that duck.
Yeah.
This is going to sound really bad than it will be for Leinster, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, Leinster have won it 3 years in a row, so you know.
Yeah, and they're, you know, to be fair to Munster, Leinster are further along in their development and will be, in my opinion, will be pushing for European honours. You know, I think Munster is still a little bit behind that, so yeah, like I think from that perspective, I think it's really important. I do think, I remember working for that game in January and speaking to the lads afterwards. A few of them, you know, they were really disappointed with how that game went. The Munster boys, you know, they really felt like they'd left that behind them. So for me, then that just showed me that there was a difference at mentality, a different mindset. You know, they felt like they belonged at that level. And I think that was a big shift, because for previous few seasons, I think when Munster played Leinster, they didn't really believe that they could win it, if that makes sense. Whereas now I think that they do. And I think Steve Larkham's bedded in really well the type of rugby that they're trying to play, or you know, moving that point of contact is really good. I think Graham Roundtree's added a lot of value to them and their set piece. So yeah, look, I think they can go up there with loads of confidence. But you know, Leinster know how to win. That's the big difference. They know how to win. They're able to eke out wins and go and find wins when, a bit like France the other day, when things might not be going your way. So from that perspective, you know, Munster, when they have their foot in the throat, they're going to have to go full throttle, and they don't have to be ruthless. They can't leave any points behind them, because Leinster are just too good.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved